constructive criticism. I'm your special guest host this week, Mason, filling in for Spencer as he's out sick fighting the flu. And I'm joined, as always, by Silver Pro and suave hair man himself, Michael Hinderucker. Michael, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. Doing okay.
Yep. We're experiencing a little bit of technical difficulties this week, so we hope that you guys can bear with us and it's not too bad. But it's an exciting week. Do you know why it's exciting, Michael?
Um, because we get to play with new Magic cards that aren't as good as the Tune with Aether.
Well, that's true. But you know what is as good as the Tune with Aether? Our two sponsors. I was going to say I got to talk about them, Oasis Games and the Mana Base. The Mana Base, you can go and get all your sealed product and check out other sponsors. We like to joke on the show a lot about Nikachu and myself, but they really do have good sealed product and prices. It's something that Oasis Games, our other sponsor, doesn't offer. You can go to themanabase.com and get your sealed product so you can draft with your friends and have a great time in this new and improved limited format. What are the odds it's worse than normal Ixalan? Can't be that high, right, Michael?
Looking through the spoiler, it looked like there were actually removal spells in this set, so, I'm optimistic.
Yeah, exactly. And there's going to be less one with the winds, less Jade Guardians. Life's better. And if you want to get all those sweet new cards for your deck and you don't want to draft, you can go to oasisgames.com and use the promo code Would That Be Good and CCMTG to get 15% off your first order. But we've got a lot to talk about today, so we're going to hop right into our always improving moments. Michael, what was your always improving moment this week?
Well, I just got back from playing a Team GP, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, lost the last couple of rounds to both Miss Top 4 and Cash, respectively, but had a good time. Got to hang out with friends and play Magic, and it was pretty great. I mean, in terms of how that made me better, I think I played, this was a 14-round tournament, and I played 12 energy mirrors, so,
Oh, nice. So I
there
didn't
was a
know about your
lot.
team setup. Yeah, so you were on standard, and you played what?
Yeah. Well, I played an energy deck, and I played 14 energy mirrors.
Huh, and there were 14 rounds?
Or 12 energy
Oh,
mirrors, rather,
12
in
energy
14
mirrors.
rounds.
Okay.
Yes.
What were the two decks
Yes,
you did?
only 12.
That's not
I
too
played
bad.
mono red. I played mono red once and beat it easily, and I played Godfarrow's Gift once and beat it easily.
Hmm. Hmm. I see. Well, you
Yeah,
know,
short events. I know.
yeah, that was that's life sometimes. In the format team formats, you always get a lot more of the best decks, anyways. But when the formats solve like
That's
this
true.
one, you get a little bit more energy than you're supposed to. It's all right. Maybe there'll be a banning in a week. Hopefully not. We'll get there when we get there.
I, yeah,
Yeah. Well, I'm
yeah. I
sorry.
mean, I mostly, yeah. It is what it is. Like you know what you're signing up for.
Yep. Yeah. Sometimes that just happens, and we're gonna go on a technical break real quick. I'm sorry about this. We'll be right back. All right.
That's bizarre.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a technical difficulty there. We had to take care of something, but we're back. Uh, Hopefully seamlessly in the actual podcast version. uh, my always improving moment this week was looking over the limited format a lot and just trying to learn the combat tricks, where they're at, learn the rares, learn the cards, because I've got a team GP in 2 weeks. So I'm just trying to get caught up on this format, get some ideas, get some exciting limited ahead of me. I can't wait, Michael.
Yeah, it's always kind of fun to play. It's kind of fun to play a Grand Prix the first weekend. Like, sort of learning it as you go to some extent, right? Like you get like maybe a pre-release before, but you're probably not gonna
Yeah.
have like played a ton of limited format already, and it's a good time for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I'm hoping to get some Magic Online drafts and sealed in leading up to the week. But Team Sealed, the decks are so much more powerful, and it's just way different.
But yeah, it's always different, but it's a good time. I think basically one of everyone's favorite formats. So
Yep. Well, we don't have any Patreon questions this week. If you want to send in a Patreon question, all you have to do is go to patreon.com or the Constructed Critics Facebook group, which you can be in for $5 or more. Leave a question, and we will happily get to it on the show. We didn't have a question this week, but we do have the return of Card of the Week. So card of the week is something we do on this show every week, or we at least used to, when we're returning to it with a new and improved format. So basically, every week there will be a card that we add to this pool, and at the end of the month, Spencer will mail the pool out to one patron of the show. So kind of like the similar way LR does it, where they do crack-a-packs, right? And they put the rares aside, and then at the end of the month, they send the rares out all to one patron. We're going to do a similar thing with this. And Michael, our first card is a thick dinosaur. So we're going to be adding two Gahalti Primal Hungers, sorry about that, to the Patreon card pool. Michael, do you know what this card does?
It's the 10 in the green 12/12
Yeah, but
that costs one less to play for each power. Is it each power you have?
yeah, for every power you have, it reduces the generic
Oh.
cost by one. It is thick. It is a 12/12.
So
for
you're
two.
saying it's the green Death Shadow?
I wouldn't say it's the green Death Shadow. I would say it's the strictly better green Death Shadow. But yeah, basically.
Oh, okay. I mean, think about how well it goes in Death Shadow.
That's true, right? You go turn one, like your Serum Visions, your Thought Scours, your Thought Seizes, whatever you want to do, right? And then you fetch an Overgrown Tomb, and then you fetch a Breeder Pool, and then you play a Death Shadow in this thing on the same turn. It's so easy.
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, nothing.
What could possibly go wrong?
No, but seriously, for Standard, this seems like a really cool card. I'm curious to see how it plays out. There are ways to get this thing down, like on turn 5, which is pretty quick with haste. If you go like the Ramp Dinosaur, and you trigger its Enrage as a block or something, then you play the I don't remember his name. The Bloodbraid dinosaur that everyone was big on last one. Carnivorous something. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, the one that gets haste and makes a 3/3. And then the next turn you can play Big Papa here. And Big Papa has 12/12 haste trample.
That's so much. This card reminds me a little bit of Carnage Tyrant.
Mm-hmm.
Just in that it's just sort of an unapologetically big dumb thing.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see if that'll be good or not.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people criticize it as win more, right? But at a certain point, if you have enough ramp and stuff like that, this might be a good enough payoff. Or if you're so in on the dinosaur synergies, then maybe this is the card you can play. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, an actual 12 trample is just really big.
Yeah. And I really do think it's going to have haste a lot of the time. Like, I think the times where you're going to want to play this card, you're going to play it with the dinosaur that grants haste. And that will be something. But that is...
Yeah, that's true.
Say what?
Maybe that's true.
Yeah. I can't imagine you playing this card without that card. So it's exciting to see. Hopefully, we will see it in the limited portion of the Pro Tour. Just come down, big old 12/12. And then the opponent uses their black Elder Dino, and it just dies instantly, and life's terrible. But
Well, I mean, or you untap once and your opponent dies instantly.
That's true. Patrick Sullivan talked about this on the
Probably not
SCG.
beating a 12/12 trample actually attacking you.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem like real life.
No, I think that's going to be your real life. You're going to tweet out, Mason called it, I hate my life, I hate Modern. Magic
I'm going to play against it in Modern.
well, because you're going to lose to it, and it's going to be a little tilting in draft because you're going to remember right now, and then in Modern, you're going to lose to it again, which is absurd. I know.
That doesn't sound like a good time.
Yeah, well, we just talked about how good it was in Death Shadow.
I want that.
Did you forget from a minute ago?
Yeah, I'm going to get Teamer Battle Raged and just die.
Yeah, instantly. Well, you can't block both 12/12s, right? It's either Death Shadow or this guy.
It's probably true. It's probably true. It sounds like a bad time.
Yep. All right, well, that is it for Card of the Week. At the end of the month, I guess it's Card of the Month, kind of, but whatever. At the end of the month, we're going to
Cards of the month.
That's right, it's multiple. You're getting two big, thick dinosaurs, which is probably enough. It's probably a play set, in all honesty. You don't really want 4 of this. This draw for turn 3 lands 4 of these. Snap it off. Can't lose. All right, but we're gonna get into our... I'm sorry, kind of?
Yeah, kind of. Maybe. We'll find out.
Don't lie to the people, Michael, about that one. That's absurd. Now, 2 of these and the other dinosaurs we talked about, now we're making a hot brew.
2 of these and 3 lands on a mold of 5. Snap it off.
Yeah, you get a scry. You're basically at the Pro Tour. Snap it off. Top 8 of a Pro Tour. So,
Sure.
Yep. But we're gonna move on now to our training grounds this week. So the training grounds is we're gonna be talking about the top 20 cards that our patrons voted on. So what we do is we have the patrons send in their top 20 list. First place gets 20 points. 20th place gets 1 point. You get the idea. We compile the list, and then those are the 20 cards we talk about. A lot of shows do set reviews, and they're going to be talking a lot about this week on your podcast roundabouts in your schedule. So we know you're going to hear about a lot of cards. So we like to talk about the cards that you, the patron, specifically want to hear about, so we can go more in depth on them and give them a little bit more time than they might get normally. So, Michael, are you ready to start with
Absolutely.
the most efficient Wrath we have in Standard when it comes to mana cost?
Bantu's Last Reckoning costs the same.
Slaughter the Strong. Forgot about Bantu still just now. Slaughter the Strong is 1 white sorcery. Each player chooses any number of creatures he or she controls with total power 4 or less, and then sacrifices all other creatures he or she controls. What do you think, Michael?
Um, it's interesting. I'm trying to imagine. So, like, this card to me feels more like Dusk Dawn than it does like a True Wrath. Like, if I'm playing some sort of deck with a number of smaller creatures, I like this a lot as like maybe like a sideboard card.
Yeah,
But it feels more like Dusk Dawn than it does like Wrath of God.
that's true. I've heard some talk about
What about you?
well, in Modern, I like. So, like is a strong word, but the idea that sounds best to me is that out of some green-white decks that are trying to be like bird decks that play Gaddock Thalia's Leonin Arbiters, for example, your birds and your nobles get under it for free, right? So it's a way
Sure.
to catch back up when you're kind of playing these dinky creatures. But I'm not sold on it. You could play Dusk Dawn, right, in those same spots, and it would do the same thing and maybe even be better as the game goes on because you can have the buyback part.
Kind of. I mean, it's an interesting thought at least. I mean, it's kind of sweet with like Voice of Resurgence, anyways, right? Because you can like, it's okay if it dies for the most part.
Yeah, you can just like keep your Thalia, your Gaddock Teeg, and sack the voice, and then upgrade your voice in some matchups, right? Maybe
Right.
it's not the
Yeah.
best.
No, it's kind of sweet. Like, it seems maybe like to me this card feels like a lot of work to make it happen for you, and it's only going to be good in like pretty specific situations. And just generally, my experience with cards with this many sort of caveats with when we're trying to draw up scenarios where this card is good, and we're like, well, if you have a Voice of Resurgence and your opponent is playing Death Shadow, and like, I think this card is fine, but I would be surprised if it saw a ton of play.
Yeah, I'm. So for Modern, right, like you just talked about, where it can kill like Death Shadow, and in theory it will like always wipe their half of the board because their board will be too big, and then your half of the board will get shrunk maybe a little bit. That is kind of cool. I'm interested if it has any standard potential, because right now I don't really see it having too much, but Teamer does clog the board up, so it's a way to like shrink it sort of. And against dinosaur decks, it might just always clear the board. Like against some decks, it could always be a 3 mana Wrath.
Yeah, I mean, I just worry that kind of like, Bantu's Last Reckoning is like a 3 mana Wrath, except when you can't afford to cast it.
Yeah.
This is kind of a 3 mana Wrath, except when it randomly doesn't have text because your opponent only has a Tassiger in play, or, hasn't put any counters on their Long Tusk Cub, and also have a Whirler Virtuoso, or, like,
Mm-hmm.
or you cast it and then they Glorybringer you because you can't disallow. Like, it just seems like there's a lot. Really conditional spells like this are hard to make work sometimes.
Yeah. I agree. That makes a lot of sense to me. It's a card that I keep rereading it and I keep thinking like maybe there's something I'm missing, but it's just
So
awkward.
I think it's like it'll, like everything else, it'll be pretty good in limited most of the time,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yep.
Just basically even conditional wraths are very strong in limited. But I have a hard time seeing this as a card that sees like a ton of play in standard or modern.
Yeah, that does seem like a bit of a stretch. I don't know. I want this card to be good because I think like the idea of it's really cool, right? Like you can like pseudo wrath you wrath their board and keep your board. It's like the dream, right? Or maybe you just lose one thing. But I just don't think it's going to be like you said, right? It's just going to have blank text too often, which is not
Yeah,
acceptable.
there are just going to be too many boards, I think, where like it's the kind of card where like the first one is mostly going to something, but if you ever draw like two in the same game, it starts getting really hard to get very much value out of the second one. And when you're looking at cards that like this feels way more a Wolf card, a la Dusk Dawn, than it does than it does like a card I would expect to see a ton of.
Yep, 100%. Let's move on to number 19, Michael. And this is a card I'm curious to get your hot take on. Radiant Destiny. So Radiant Destiny is an enchantment that has Ascend, which is our first time talking about this keyword in this thing. So if you control 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. The City's Blessing normally gives an upside to one of your cards that have Ascend. So in this case, as Ascend enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type, and then creatures you control get +1/+1. And if you have the City's Blessing, they also get Vigilance. So,
Yeah.
what do you think about this card, Michael?
So just to note, on permanence with Ascend, it's like checked on an ongoing. It's being checked for on an ongoing basis. So if you ever exceed 10 or more permanents, then you have it for the rest of the game, but you don't have to have 10 or more permanents as you cast it. That's my understanding at least.
Yeah, so I think if you cast like the Devour Flesh one, like the Edict, it checks then. But for this, I think it checks every
For
time.
for any of them that stay in play, it's like always checking.
Yeah,
So if at any point you control 10 or more permanents, then you have it for the rest, for as long as the game continues.
mm,
So this seems like a card where if there's like some kind of a token deck, this is probably pretty good. But we haven't seen any really strong like creature type decks since zombies, I guess, and we're like there wasn't a lot that stuck out to me that I would want to play white for that looked like constructed playable. We I don't know. I'm not big on this card. I think 3 mana is a fair rate for this kind of effect if it doesn't have a deck building constraint. But having to play all creatures of the same type is always a deck building constraint, and right now might be like even more than usual kind of a deck building constraint.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It feels like unless they're laying the groundwork for like in a future set, right, where white has more supported tribes, dinosaurs doesn't really need +1/+1. They're thick enough as they are, and it's kind of like forced to be vampires, where like some servos with like the enchantment on the token deck, right? So it feels like
Right.
you're like kind of cornered into being a vampire deck or the tokens deck. But I don't know if the
But
tokens deck ever wants this card.
the tokens deck, like not everything shares the same creature type, right?
Yeah, it's a
Like
mixture.
I can't imagine playing this in like actual like anointed procession hidden stockpile. That just seems crazy bad.
hmm
And like the vampires deck isn't actually all vampires, right? It was playing like Angel of Invention. It was just like a go wide deck.
Do you think that could
So
change with the new set? They did get like a 2 mana lord and a few cards, but
there are a few things, but like it's just a really big deck building cost to actually say, hey, I'm going to play all vampires.
that's fair.
And I don't think this card is nearly good enough to like. I just don't think this card is that good.
What about
I think you're basically 3 mana for +1/+1 is about the going rate, and I don't think Vigilance is as good in a really go wide deck. Like
I wish it was first card.
Vigilance matters more when you have less creatures, right? It matters less like if we have like Oketra's Monument or whatever. Like I don't really care if my guys have Vigilance.
Oh yeah, you can just name humans.
Right. I mean, you
Oh,
like
I didn't even think of that.
you could do whatever, but like
Huh.
vigilance is not that. I don't think having 10 permanents is the important part. I think the basic thing is just like a creature type Glorious Anthem doesn't move the needle.
Yeah, there's no way it's good enough in modern either, right? Like there's intangible virtue and all those other cards that are very similar for
Yeah, I
like
mean,
tokening strategies and stuff.
I think Intangible Virtue is like very clearly not good enough and also very clearly just better.
Yeah, a whole mana a lot less and not having to have the city's blessing is huge. So, although,
Yeah, and like every creature token, so yeah, I
yeah.
don't know.
Did you play during intangible virtue in standard? That's like right before I
No.
started playing. Okay, I was curious if that was a thing back then because I mean this is like it becomes that card, so maybe it's an analog there. But I don't want to
It
just talk about
becomes
something I
that
never did.
card, but it's a lot of work. Like I think this card is almost strictly worse than Intangible Virtue. And I certainly don't think of Intangible Virtue as like a multi-format all-star, right? I mean,
Oh, I don't.
like
Yeah.
if they printed Intangible Virtue, if this card was just Intangible Virtue, is that a card you'd be interested in playing? I don't really think so.
No, but this one does it. It's more than just tokens, right? So Intangible Virtue only hits tokens. This hits creatures as well, like actual cards.
Right, I
Yeah,
get that, but I think that type might actually end up being more restrictive than token.
that's fair.
That's my main point. That like
Yeah,
for especially for 1 mana less, I think this card is mostly just worse than Intangible Virtue.
that's fair. Well, put it in your Commander Tribal Kifkin deck.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting, and I certainly might be wrong. I
Yeah.
mean, I just feel like 3 mana is a lot for this kind of effect.
Yeah, I'm. There's this and another card that I think if we get wrong, we're going to be so wrong about. Like, if this card's good, it's probably great, but
I would be
I trust.
shocked.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be great. I do think though I had forgot about humans, which is like an actual type. I always figured that's like a creature type in Magic, but I
Yeah.
don't think there are enough good humans. So
No, and I mean like in modern, like I don't know if you've played the humans deck at all,
I have, but they
but
don't hit us at all.
no, it just doesn't really. It's not really what you're looking for. Like the Thalia 3-drop non-creature deck is super awkward.
And your ancient Ziggurat deck.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean not even get into the worst of it, but
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Okay, well, Radiant Destiny, it snuck on the list. You know, it barely got in here. It's cool. I hope. I
Yeah,
kind of
I
hope
mean
I'm wrong
it's
because I
kind of
want tribal decks to
interesting.
be good, but I don't think we are.
Yeah, I just don't think it's quite good enough.
Yeah, sad times all around. It's pouring out for Radiant Destiny. But you know what we get to talk about that's kind of exciting, Michael, and go on this journey to eternity. So one black green legendary enchantment aura. Enchanted creature you control gets when an enchanted creature dies, return to the battlefield. I'm sorry, return this card to the battlefield under your control. Oh, I'm sorry, I misread this card twice. Okay, so when the enchanted creature dies, return it to the battlefield. So worst case scenario, they kill your creature, you get the creature back. Then this also returns to the battlefield transformed.
No. Worst
Right?
case scenario, they kill your creature in response to this.
Michael, Magical Christmas Land doesn't involve you silver pros killing my stuff in response. We're gonna wait till they
No.
tap out.
All right.
All right. So yes, with all auras, the worst case scenario is that. But like we all know that's the worst case. All right. We accept that
Right. I
risk.
mean,
Yeah.
that's the downside of auras, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's just like fundamentally the reason that auras are usually not good
Hmm.
is because of that.
Yes.
That being said, I do think this card is kind of sweet.
Well, we get to talk about the back half too.
Yeah. So so you get your creature back, and then it comes back as a land that makes one of any color, and you can also pay 5 and tap it to return a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield, which is like a pretty insane effect on a land.
Yeah. That is. I mean, like, so in the situations where you don't get blown out by like in response, all lightning strike or rage or whatever, like you get the creature back immediately, and then you get a land that makes any color of mana, which I imagine you could be a 2 to 3 color deck. So that's just nice. And then as the game goes on,
Yeah,
you have
it's
this
at least
unbeatable engine.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think this. I'm a little surprised this didn't get ranked a little higher.
Same.
I don't really know. Like, I guess the big problem then is like, sort of, what engine are we using with this to like to flip it in the first place, right? Like, we need creatures that kind of die on their own.
Yep. That's
Like,
true.
I mean, you
Or
can
a
do
sack
like
outlet. That's good.
well, I mean, maybe like Walking Ballista or something like that, but you need some sort of way to either have a sack outlet or like have the creature be able to kill itself,
Hmm.
right? I mean, obviously, like Walking Ballista isn't going to be powerful to return to the battlefield, but having like you need things that aren't requiring like your opponent to block,
Yeah, that's true. I guess
right? Like
Yahenni is the best one I can think of, but
sure, but I don't know how much a deck with Yahenni wants this style of effect.
yeah. And that's the biggest thing, right? Is
Uh,
like this card's really good, but you have to jump through a lot of hoops to get it to the good half.
yeah, I'm not sure that that everything is really quite there for this card right now, but this is one I would keep an eye on for sure. Like, if some kind of value-based deck is this card's just really powerful if you actually flip it. I mean, it might end up just being that it's a little bit too tricky to actually flip consistently,
Hmm.
but it's certainly a powerful one and probably one to keep your eye on.
I wonder, is this card like reasonable in the sideboards of green black snakes and soul tide snake decks as a way to go long against control decks? Because some of them are playing like Scarab God, right, which we talked about last time I was on the show, and this is like a card that also goes long, and I mean, it doesn't fill the exact same role, right? But it does provide you this late game engine against them.
Yeah, I don't like how bad it is against Cast Out and Settle the Wreckage.
That's true.
Um, so I don't know that it like really is going to end up working there like you want it to, but I think that there are like there's a lot to like. If you actually flip it, it's just like it's a very powerful effect. Ideally, I think I'd want something with a little bit more top heavy, like a little more of a top heavy mid range deck rather than a really lean mid range deck.
Hmm.
Like it feels like if we ever get to the part of the game where you're like, flipping Gear Hulks into play every turn, that's probably just going to be good enough, right?
Yeah, I people can't really beat that in standard.
But if you're like flipping a snake into play every turn, you know,
Yeah,
that's
it's not great.
like, well, it's not nothing, but it's not the end of the game, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so your deck has to like, yeah, I don't know. It's weird. I mean, this might be a card that's just not good now, and in like 3 sets, and when standard's pool is bigger, it's great. But because it feels like you could play it in snake type decks, and those are the ones I keep coming back to because they're like the best green black decks we have right now. But even when you do have to have like the Gear Hulks in the graveyard for it to be good, or like Hostage Taker and have it die so you can repeat it, which is all we're asking a whole lot of this deck.
Right. I mean, we saw some of like people playing reanimator style decks for brief periods, right? With like uh Liliana
Oh
and
yeah,
stuff
the
like that. Like I don't remember exactly what those looked like, but I think this card is at least interesting. It might be tricky to might just be tricky to make it work for you. I think in limited this card is going to be pretty great. Like,
agreed.
it's really hard for your opponent to kill you without just like attacking sooner or later.
Yeah, and then it also gives a creature like essentially unblockable, right? So if you have a creature with an on-hit effect or something like that,
Right.
like you basically just get in there every time. And green and
Right.
black have
And
those effects a lot.
well, and this card is almost impossible to grind out, right? Like if
Yeah,
your opponent actually flips it, you're pretty much going to lose to it almost every game.
yeah, agree. Is there anything in modern? Are we like I can't
I
think
mean,
of
I was
anything in
thinking of
modern.
like Sakura Tribelder is definitely the best thing to enchant with it
Oh, yep, that makes a lot of sense.
by like a huge amount because you just get it back immediately and can get another land.
Yeah, and then you're actually activating this the following turn with your land drop, right? Because you
Right,
play
but I don't
Tri-Belder,
know that
this,
like
that. Yeah.
it feels really fair. You know what I mean? Like the metagame would have to be a lot different for like extra grindy to be what you're looking for in your black green deck.
Oh, what's that card that's like black, 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 X sacrifice things? Death's Cloud?
Death Cloud.
Yeah, we found the Death Cloud upgrade.
Yeah, I mean you could do some cute things, but like traditionally that deck doesn't really play a lot of creatures, right?
Yeah, that's why the Secure Tri-Builder is so great. This works so great in our Death Cloud deck.
Yeah,
That's,
I mean, like I feel like in the end you might just have to. It might just be like a little bit too hard to actually
yeah. No, you're right.
make feel unfair. You know what I mean? Like it's like it might end up just being slightly too fair, but it is really powerful, and I think it's a cool design too.
Yeah, I think this is a card that we're gonna like every time the set gets like fully spoiled, like the next ones, we're gonna be like, all right, does like Journey to
Is this card
Eternity?
good
Yeah,
yet?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Also, I mean, Journey to Eternity kind of rhymes, and it's just like something I want to say a lot.
Is that a
So
what's the power ranking on
that
that as
that's
a
a big.
band name? Like a garage band, Journey to Eternity. Is
I
that
don't know,
is not high enough for you? Doesn't do it.
but it's like pretty good as a card name. It's probably
Yeah.
better than whatever the backside is named.
Adzal, the Cave of Eternity, rolls right off the tongue.
Yeah, the backside looks kind of lame in comparison, and like the art on the backside is kind of lame too. So
Yeah. I like the little head garment, but that doesn't matter. That's really great for the people in their cars driving to work. Because let's talk about the card art. Let's move on to number 17 on the list, which is, all right, here we go, Michael. Nezahal.
Nezahal,
Yes, I did it.
Primal
Primal
Tide.
Tide. All right, take this one away, buddy.
All right, we were so this is a 7 mana 7/7. It can't be countered. You have no maximum hand size. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, draw a card, and you discard 3 cards to exile. Then it ETBs tapped at the beginning of the next end step.
Yep.
So it's like it's very Pearl Link Pearl Lake Ancient-y.
Yeah, my understanding is that who's he was on the game podcast. That guy though that went over there. This was like one of the first cards he worked on, and he loved Pearl Lake Ancient. So it
Andrew
makes
Brown?
Andrew Brown. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, so Pearl Lake Ancient's probably a little bit better at not the whole not dying part, right? Because discarding 3 cards is obviously way harder and way more restrictive than returning 3 lands. But this one does draw you a card every time your opponent tries to kill it, right?
Yeah, it also doesn't have Flash, which I felt like was Pearl Lake Ancient's basically only redeeming quality a lot of the time.
Oh, this
Um,
doesn't.
No, so like it's kind of awkward and it's kind of vanilla, right? Like it can still be targeted. Like so I'm imagining this like it's probably good in the actual pure control mirror, but I'm not that convinced that it's actually good against anything else. Like
So it's like a sideboard card.
well, yeah, and it might be
Ma-
like a one of sideboard card, like
Yeah.
if at all. Because my issue with this card is like if you're playing like a mid range deck and you tap 7 mana, if they have like a board, they can just spend a removal spell on it because it doesn't like it's like supposed to be wrath proof, but it gets flicker wisp, right? So
Yeah.
like you can just like you can like tempo someone out even if they play this. Like so it's not gonna die very much, but you can make it not do anything pretty easily.
That's true. Yeah, is my with approach of the second sun, like being the premier control deck, this card just probably doesn't matter a whole lot unless you're like a hard control deck. And then in the mirror, I guess like it is kind of hard to beat, right? Like you resolve it and then
Yeah, I do think if your opponent just has like no creatures on board, it's almost impossible to beat. I don't think you can really beat this card with spells most of the time.
yeah. So I guess it's just
Like
relegated
you
to
have to
just
beat it, you have to
sideboard.
beat it just by racing it, right? But it does seem insane in a control mirror. I mean, it's kind of like Sphinx the Final Word, right? Like you never want to draw more than one in a game. You don't always even want to draw one, but if you want to draw one and you draw one, it's basically impossible to beat.
That's the highest praise I've ever heard from you, Michael. You sometimes you don't even want to draw one. No,
Well, I mean,
yeah,
it makes
it's
sense
true.
though,
It's
right?
true.
Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just funny.
you want to see somewhere between 0 and 1.
Yeah, I I hope this card is good enough. I don't. It's really
The
hard
art
with
is
approach to
sweet.
this. Oh yeah, the card looks amazing. I like that a whole lot.
Yeah, it's super cool.
It's a little Loch Ness monstery, but with approach to the second sun being like the main control deck, this card just
I
doesn't.
think this card is good against I think this card is good in and against approach. I mean, it's very if your opponent's like trying to side into a bunch of negates, like this card looks pretty good against that.
Yeah,
But I mean, I just
yeah,
all I'm really saying is I think this is a card that's pretty difficult to main deck without a metagame that looks drastically different than anything we've seen recently.
yeah. No, that's what I'm sorry. I should have clarified. Like, I really wanted this to be a main deck card. Like, that's what they wanted, but it's just not. I can't see it.
Yeah, just a 7 mana 7/7 is like super difficult. If discarding 3 cards gave you the choice between returning it immediately untapped or returning it at end of turn, like maybe. But I think that like you're gonna get tempoed off it way too often,
Hmm. That's
right? And I
fair.
mean that was kind of similar to the way you could sometimes lose with Pearl Lake Ancient too, right? Like I definitely saw some games where Pearl Lake Ancient, picked up 8 lands or whatever, and it got kind of awkward.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there was a real cost to Pearl Ancient. At least back then, you had lands that sometimes gained you life. But yeah, this. I mean, yeah, the sideboard's good, and I don't think it's really gonna see modern play now. Limited. Is it even?
Oh,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
this
this
is.
card is super annoying and limited. It's very much Aethertide Whale. I mean, it's probably not quite as good as Aethertide Whale, but Aethertide Whale was also really aggravating, so
Yeah.
it has sort of that same feel, right?
Yeah, that's true. All right. Well, Primal Tide. We hardly knew ya. We'll see you in the sideboards as a one of.
I mean, I think to be fair, like, it's a card I expect to lose to a bunch of times.
Yeah, that's true.
Very, like, if the game becomes about it, you can't really stop it from happening to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess like people's perception of that card's gonna be really skewed, right? Because every time that's played against them, they're probably brought it in for them, and they're like,
Oh,
"Oh my
yeah.
gosh, this card's
Oh,
unbeatable."
it's a card you're going to lose to, like, 80% of the time it gets cast.
Yeah, we just have to have a world where we can cast it or a matchup.
Yeah,
Where we cast it.
exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Well, I know a matchup in a deck that I want to play this next one in, Michael, and that's every Merfolk deck in Modern It's Merfolk Mistbinder. Blue-green for a Merfolk Shaman. We got that crossover here. Other Merfolks you control get +1/+1. It's a 2/2. With Phantasmal Image, Michael, you can play 16 2-mana Merfolks in Modern that are Lords.
Is that what
So
people are doing? Do you cut? I don't like. I don't play Merfolk
I don't
ever
either,
because
but
I don't hate myself. But
so continue.
do you cut like Marrow Rejuries for this and
I,
just try to make it more of like a swarmy zoo style deck, or like? I mean, there's nothing else to really cut, right? Like most people already aren't playing Master of Waves anymore.
Yeah, the only ones that are really can be cut are, and most people aren't playing Curse Catcher. So if you're playing Curse Catcher, you could cut that. But they're cutting the
Well, if you're playing green, right, you're playing Kumena's Speaker and like the Branch Walker
yes,
thing
yeah.
most of the time.
So if you're playing green, I guess there's no real green deck unless that plays Curse Catcher. That's done well at a big event. The 2/2 flash that costs 4 if you flash it. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, Harbinger, yeah.
Yeah, you
But that card's kind of sweet. Like you can't cut all those. Like you need some.
need some disruption.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, in general, I'm not really sure. I feel folk. I don't know why I would play Merfolk.
Well, some
But
people love Merfolk, Michael.
sure, but
Merfolk decks matter.
well, I mean, I'm not really talking about like what we enjoy. I mean, we all think different things are cool or whatever, but like,
Oh,
I'm sure what the answer is. And I don't know that this card really. And looking, so like I looked at this stuff in standard a little bit too. You actually have some pretty decent, like your curve looks okay, and like Silvergill Adept is kind of sweet, and this guy's kind of sweet, and it's like a bunch of pretty good 2-drops, but there are no removal spells in blue green, obviously.
yeah.
And like if you have to play energy cards, I don't really know what the incentive is.
Yeah, you lagged out there for a second, but I think we can circle back around to Modern in a second. But yeah, for Standard, I think the incentive is that you want to play a tribal deck, Michael, and it's like probably the best tribal deck, right? It
Well,
seems like
maybe
it's the
we'll end
most
up
real.
playing tribal decks if if something in energy gets banned.
Oh, the B word.
Yeah, if they ban Lay of the Land, then here we are.
Lay of the Land and City of the Brass. Yep. Then we're we're back
I
in
mean,
it.
Aether Hub is substantially better than City of Brass, but
Right, but I couldn't remember what the other card is that was like it. Oh, Tendo Icebridge. Tendo Icebridge. I mean, it's way better than that card too, but that was
yeah,
the
I
card.
mean, City of Brass is a lot better than Nintendo Icebridge.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, but no.
Yeah, but I like this card is there's like a density of Merfolk that like are reasonably justifiable at least, right? Where you're not just like, oh man, this deck is crazy bad. I'm playing all of this horrible garbage. Like there are actually like between this and Cometa Speaker and Branch Walker, and I guess you could play like Metallic Mimic or
Yeah, I was gonna say Metallic Mimic
whatever.
and Jade Hunter, which is a card we'll get to in a little bit, are both also
Yeah,
in this.
yeah, they're like some totally Merfolk, and I wouldn't be shocked to sleeve them up.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it like I think the deck has to have a low curve, right? Like you need to really be pushing that part of the deck, like curving out against your opponents to win. It's just hard to imagine a world where you can consistently do that against Teamer. So, I mean, you can. I mean, I
Yeah, I mean,
definitely see
Teamer's
draws.
just really good. Like,
Yeah, there are definitely draws where you beat Teamer, right? Like that. There's no question in that. It's just how consistent Teamer is and how like good the core of the energy deck is, right?
oh
And this
yeah,
deck just will
no, I
like
mean, just like
draw that
Long
halves.
Tusk Cub looks really hard to beat.
Yeah, which is maybe not the best place to be in the world.
Like Long Tusk Cub into Bristling Hydra seems mostly impossible, which is okay. Like, I mean, if every deck was going to be as good as Energy, we would have some pretty frustrating power creep, I think. So,
Yeah, and
you know,
also like when the rotation happens, this deck will probably be one of the best decks, or it'll be like one of the first decks people go to.
something
Right?
something
Yeah.
at least people will try. I mean, it's
Yeah.
certainly a deck that it looks like Wizards, pre-assembled for you a little bit, right?
Yep. Yeah. Well, I'm sure we're talking about that in a year about how Wizards just built us a Merfolk deck and we're complaining about it. But
I mean, it's possible, but I mean, this guy is kind of sweet, right? It's more of the same that we've seen from Merfolk, but it's at a good rate. And there are a lot of reasonably playable Merfolk in Standard. This guy's also going to be a house in Draft.
Yeah, she really is. I the Merfolk payoff would be kind of crazy. So, I guess I want to wrap up the modern thing because you lagged there a little bit. So you were saying that you just don't see the appeal of this card, where in
So
modern.
I think this card is fine. I think it's probably better
Yeah.
than Marrow Reachery. I mean, as cute as Reachery can be with like, you can do some really nasty Vile tricks and whatever. I think just more twos is better.
Just yeah, curving all
But
the time.
but I fundamentally it just seems like zoo style decks haven't been good in a long time, and there's not really any reason to think they will be ever again.
Yeah. Not unless the format changes a lot.
Yeah, like we just need to move pretty far from where we are right now before I'm trying to sleeve up, you know, guys with no abilities.
Well, Michael, they all have abilities. They get bigger with each other. They draw cards where they're unblockable. Boom.
Right,
Boom.
but like why are we trying to play, 2 mana 4/4s when we can play 1 mana 7/7s?
Because, Michael, me and the professor love Merfolk. And we're not going to not play Merfolk. So, some people just like Merfolk. Like that, they just enjoy the
Well,
playstyle, right? Like, I know
sure,
people who
sure,
just
sure.
love it, but yeah.
I mean, so again, I have nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with just playing what you want to
Oh,
play.
yeah, yeah.
That's always
Yeah. I'm not
always
saying that you're saying that, but
totally reasonable. Just if I'm looking at things from a strictly like what is the most correct deck to be playing, I have a hard time believing that something like this elevates Merfolk beyond something you just play because you like Merfolk.
that's fair. Do you think blue green Merfolk's better than blue Merfolk before we go on? Or is that
Um,
PT Tech?
it's definitely not PT Tech at this point. I haven't thought about that at all. I mean, I looked through the set or whatever and
Yeah.
basically decided I didn't think there were enough and there was anything that really moved the needle. I think this is just often true in Modern. It's really easy for cards that are printed to make a deck go from like definitely wrong. It's really hard for cards to move a deck from probably wrong to like good choice. You're just looking for like a much bigger jump there.
Yeah.
That being said, I do think I would probably play blue green. I think 12 Merfolk Lords at 2 casting cost is better. And my experience, my admittedly limited experience with and against the deck, has been that Harbinger of the Tides is one of the best cards in the deck. And being able to keep Vials on 2 because you're not trying to tick them up for Reachery, I think is a boon.
Yep. Or we're going to just cut Vile and then just
I,
curve.
yeah, maybe. Maybe
Yeah.
that's correct. I don't know.
Uh, I I had this thing where like Vile's like a great card in like Magic's history, right? But it just seems, except for humans in Modern, it seems to always underperform when I watch that card.
No, I mean, it's definitely better the more varied effects you have in your deck. And it's like, despite it being sort of awkward with Reachery, I can understand like the thought process that, hey, maybe this card actually, like, you need to be playing Marrow Reacheries for this card to make sense.
Yeah.
Right? Because, like, so like, my good friend and former co-host Matt played Blue White Death and Taxes this weekend,
Okay.
and like when you have like Spell Quellers and Selfless Spirits and Mausoleum Wanderers, Aether Vial like is super scary.
That makes a lot of sense. And you played that in Legacy or Modern?
No, in
Okay. All right.
modern. Uh, yeah, but when you have like a lot of sort of varied effects at different spots on the curve, Vial is really good. But when you're playing it to basically be super noble hierarch, I'm unsure how good it actually is.
That's fair. All right. Well, let's move on to the next
Right?
card. Yeah. I'm sure you're going to love this card, Michael. It's Thrashing Brontodon. 1 GG dinosaur. You can pay 1 and sack the Thrashing Brontodon to destroy target enchantment or artifact. And it's a 3/4. So, 3 mana 3/4 that sometimes blows up artifacts and enchantments. What do you think?
Uh, I mean, I don't really know what to say about this. It looks fine.
Yeah.
It's like it's pretty good.
Yeah, if Marvel and stuff was still around, then like you could play this and like B and then sack to kill the Marvel. But it's nice to have these kind of cards in the format. But I don't really think it's a card we're gonna
But
see a lot
it's
of main
just
deck
not
play.
very interesting, right? It's like, the worst Quasali Pride Mage ever.
Whoa, I don't want to put that on it, but yeah, probably.
Right? Like it's fine. It's like it's totally fine. It's just not like, oh man, Thrashing Brontodon, this is what I've been waiting for, right?
Maybe you,
It's a
Michael.
it's
I
a good
drink smaller
safety valve.
brews. Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
good safety valve.
It's nice to have these cards, and
Yep.
with the conversations over the last year, it's not surprising that like a bunch of people on the Patreon were like, "Yes, we have a card like this we've been wanting," and so they put it. This was one that was on like everyone's list. That's combined points got it up here, so that's why.
Yeah, that it got 20th a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It was near the bottom half always, but
Like
it was on every bottom half.
I would be shocked if this card saw no play, but like this isn't a card you're excited about,
Yeah, it's
right?
something. Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's
It's
move on to
fine.
the next one. This one might get a little bit more than fine, Michael. This is Daring Buccaneer. Red for a creature human pirate. As an additional cost to cast Daring Buccaneer, reveal a pirate, or pay 2 generic mana. It's a 2/2.
I think
So,
this card's like actually pretty good if there's some sort of a pirate deck. Like this sort of alternate cost or whatever like is actually pretty reasonable. It's gonna mostly be, you know, a 2/2 for one. And then if we're at a stage in the game where like this has to go in a pretty aggressive deck, right? So like either we're curving and we just have another pirate, or we top deck this and paying 3 is fine because we didn't have anything else to do.
yeah, no, I agree.
I
I
mean,
really
the
like.
question is whether you can play an actual pirate aggro deck, and I mean that's sort of that's a much tougher question than whether or not this card is good in a hypothetical deck, because this card is definitely good in that hypothetical deck.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I was gonna say the exact same thing, right? Like pirates, if they're a deck, this is a big reason why. Like the aggressive red X pirate deck is a deck, right? We just need to find
Yeah,
a
this is
pirate
really
deck.
good.
Yeah,
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 this card is really good. I don't know that like it doesn't. It's not like okay. So this is like a tertiary support card, right? Like this card is good, but you're not like playing a deck to play a 1 mana 2/2,
yes, yeah, agreed.
right?
It's just
Like
a big role player, and like in why it's good.
it's a good card, but it's very much the you know the Falcon Wrath Gorger
Ooh,
style, right? Like it's like it's fine, and it maybe is a tertiary piece, but you can't like you can't play a deck just to play a 2/2 for one.
yeah, that's true. And the cool part, I think one of the cool parts of this card is that like, Ramen Up Red doesn't get a 1 mana 2/2, right? Like they made a aggressively costed red card that like maybe they want to play, maybe they wouldn't, right? But they can't really play it unless they want to
Right.
play
So
Donald Smith's deck, Treasure
I
Red.
mean,
Uh,
did is Carrie's have a pirate too?
yeah, Carrie. I'm pretty sure she's a pirate. Let's look it up with the
Find out.
power of the internet real quick.
Carrie's a she is a human pirate. Yes. So
Yep.
I mean, you could hypothetically.
Lannery
I don't.
Storm.
I actually. And well, Wiley Goblin a pirate?
Wiley Goblin might be a pirate.
Yeah,
Oh man.
it is a pirate, man.
Oh, they're just gonna play
So
this
you
card. Just
can
let
sort
them
of
fool.
play a weird red deck.
F&M Red.
Yeah. World's red, as
Yeah.
Donald would call it. But but yeah, I mean, Daring Buccaneer is like kind of an interesting one. Like it's certainly powerful. It seems to me a lot like, you know, the Merfolk Lord, right? It's like if you want to play this deck, clearly this card is good. The question is whether or not this is like a thing you can actually do.
Yep. Makes a lot of sense to me. All right, let's move on to the next one. Let's go on to... Oh, this is a cool pirate. Warkite Marauder. So this is 1 in a blue for a creature human pirate flying. Whenever Warkite Marauder attacks, target creature defending player control loses all abilities and has base power and toughness 0/1 until end of turn. And it's a 2/1.
This card is sweet with like with the other one, right? Like so this card actually, one of the interesting things about it is that it doesn't necessarily encourage you to play a deck of all flyers with it. Right? Like you're not necessarily trying to play like this in Stormfleet Aerialist and Siren Storm Tamer all together.
Yeah.
You're just like you're kind of trying to like it actually works better with creatures that are attacking on the ground a lot of the time.
Yeah, because it will always phase... It will get rid of the best blocker, right? So it turns
Right.
the best creature just into a nothing, which is good.
It seems kind of sweet with like Bomad Career to me.
Oh,
I
so
mean,
like battling for one and then play this, they play
it
something,
just
and they can't
yeah,
block.
it just like gives you some chance, between that and like a removal spell to actually keep your Bowmat Courier relevant.
Yeah.
Or just like any one drops or cheap creatures. I don't think this card is like that good, but I could be wrong.
It
Like
kills all
a
the gods, which is good.
one flying for 2 is not the worst. Well, it doesn't really kill the gods, right?
Well,
Like,
it lets you kill them. How about that? Sorry.
sure.
It opens them up.
Yeah, I mean,
It also resets long test cub counters, which is nice, right? Like you're trying to play like a blue flyers deck or something, like a tempo deck, and they're just trying to like race you with a cub, then it becomes harder to do that.
I don't think it loses the counters.
Oh, does it not?
It
Loses all
loses all
ability.
abilities and has base
Uh,
power. I'm pretty sure it
yeah.
specifically still have the counters.
It's
But
silly. I'm dumb. Yep. That's just me being dumb.
no, you're good. But it is interesting. Like, it's kind of a powerful tempo card, right? Like, there are a lot of games where like this on the play is just going to make it really hard for your opponent to ever block.
That's true. You can
Like,
also, I guess, you can force Hydra activations too, right? Because if they want to block with their Hydra, they're gonna have to use energy.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting. I mean, I don't know how good this card really is, but it definitely, I could see it being good. If there's sort of a blue tempo-y deck, like this card really, really is powerful.
Yeah. Agreed.
I don't think this card has a lot of like eternal format applicability. I would be shocked to see this in modern.
Yeah, I don't think this card's a consideration for modern unless Pirates somehow becomes a thing in 10 years.
No, it's
Yeah.
just not good enough.
All right.
Just the rate is not good enough.
Well, here's a card that might be good enough for standard and maybe modern one day. It's this Deep Root Elite, 1 in a green creature Merfolk Warrior. Whenever another Merfolk enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target Merfolk you control. It is a 1/1. What do you think about this card, Michael?
I feel like this needed to maybe not exclude itself.
Oh, so like even when itself, so it's at least a 2/2.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like I've seen this style of card too often, and like it's just really hard not for this to die.
Yeah, it does that to a lot of stuff. It is nice though that it is a lord. Like it's not really a lord, but it like kind of acts like a pseudo one, right? Like a mini lord. Like you play a Merfolk and it gets bigger, so that like even if this thing goes away, they still have the buff, which is nice for standard, right? Am I
Yeah.
crazy? Or
No, I think this card is like it's it's close to being good, right? It's like not. I just think fundamentally, like you're really asking a lot of a. You're just asking a lot. Like it has to. So you have to play this on like 2, right? Because it needs to be one of the first things out of your hand,
yeah, it needs to be 2 or 3 with a 1 drop.
and then it has to not die, and then you have to like immediately follow it up with like creature, and that just sort of like you're starting to get pigeonholed into this like you know 21 land 35 creature deck, and that just fundamentally it like takes so many deck building choices away from you to play a card like this,
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
right? Like you pretty much are just locked into playing a huge amount of Merfolk if this is a guy you want to play. And that's not necessarily a problem. And I mean, you can definitely do some really gross things with like turn 2 this guy, turn 3 second this guy, Kumena's Speaker or whatever. But I feel like this card is. It looks a lot like Metallic Mimic to me.
Yeah, it actually is just Metallic Mimic, right? It's like 1 power less, and it's always Merfolk.
Well, and you can like stack them up on something. So if you want to use,
Oh yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
Sure, if you're like an
like
unblockable thing, like that one.
yeah, right. But there's like there's like a little more utility. But the question ultimately is like, so if we're looking at building this deck, you're going to play Kumena's Speaker as a 1 drop. I don't know what your other 1 drop would be, but it would have to be a
Unblockable.
Merfolk.
There's a 1/1 unblockable one.
Is it a 1/1 for one that's just unblockable?
That's literally it. But I think that's the only other Merfolk that's a 1 drop.
Right, or like Jungle Delver, or the
Oh
one
yeah,
that
Jungle
puts a
Delver.
counter, the one that puts a counter on another target Merfolk, right? The
Sure.
on one for one. There's like a common. So you just get like pigeonholed into playing this really awkward deck where like you're gonna play like four of these and four metallic mimics and four of the lords and four silver gill adepts and
Four branch walkers.
four merfolk branch walkers and like it's not bad, but I don't know how we're ever beating like a fumigate or a glorybringer or like a fatal push really. Like it just seems very hard to line it all up correctly.
Yeah, it's one where
These sort of like
yeah,
it's
this is
like playing like a Thalia's Lieutenant, right?
yeah.
It's like playing like a Thalia's Lieutenant deck. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I much yeah. Well, your payoff's also way less than Thalia's Lieutenant, but yeah, right. It's interesting because there is that 4 mana 2/3 that gives all your creatures with +1/+1 counters unblockable. So maybe that's what this is trying to push you towards. But I don't know. I don't know if that's actually
Yeah,
good
but
enough.
like
Yeah.
that card seems crazy bad. Yeah, it just seems like a lot of this stuff just doesn't seem like it plays defense very well.
Hmm.
And my experience has been that mostly if you're on the draw, it's really hard to just flood the board with enough stuff given the pretty good removal spells we have to force the action to always have you be the aggressor.
That is true. I don't know, I was just a lot of times when I'm looking at new sets, one of the things I try and look for is like what is the designer wanting people to do, and this card clearly wants to work with that other 2/3, right? So
Right.
I don't know if that's good
Yeah, no,
enough.
I mean it's cute for sure.
Yeah.
There are like a lot of kind of powerful merfolk, but I worry a lot about like playing the 20 land 40 creature deck. Your creatures just have to be really good, and I'm not sure that these guys are quite good enough.
That's fair. All right, let's move on to number 11. And number 11 is a card that I'm pretty big on. I'm curious to hear your opinion of, and that's Hadana's Climb. So, excuse me, it is an enchantment, one green blue. At the beginning of your combat of your, I'm sorry, at the beginning of combat of your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Then, if that creature has three or more +1/+1 counters on it, transform Hadana's Climb. So, before we go any further, at the beginning of combat, one of your things gets +1/+1, right? So that kind of works with the 2/3 we talked about a second
Sure.
ago and some of the other merfolk, which is nice. But the flip side is, I think, the real payoff here, which is the Winged Temple of Orkoza or Orazaka?
Orazka.
Orazka. All right.
Orazka.
Well, it taps for 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. And then, Michael, for one blue green, target creature you control gets +X/+X, where X is its power, and flying. So,
And flying.
yeah.
So yeah, so like that part seems pretty powerful to me, but I am not a huge fan of the front side. I mean, I guess you can like kind of do it all at once, right? Like you can probably over two turns, like by the time you put the second counter on the same thing.
Hmm.
Uh, I think this card might be good. It's like it's a little awkward, right? Like it really encourages you into sinking a bunch of resources into the same creature,
Hmm.
and if even if that resource is just time, again, the removal spells we have in this format are really good, and it seems kind of easy to punish someone for throwing a bunch of counters on the same thing. I mean, honestly, the card I really don't want to play against with this is it seems like Bristling Hydra, right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah, yeah, because you can put the counters and then it immediately
so you put
comes
the
through.
counters and it's like hexproof on its
Yeah.
own, and it's just really hard to actually kill. But like, I mean, this makes that last one a little bit better, right?
Yeah, it makes the deep root elite much
Like
better.
being able to actually stack up a bunch of counters on the same thing is kind of powerful. I don't know. I feel like cards like this are almost never good enough. Like this card is going to absolutely slaughter you in limited basically
Every time.
every time you play against it. It's like baby Citadel Siege. I mean, it's obviously not nearly that good, but it's still going to be very hard to beat. If your opponent goes this into like a River Herald's Boon or whatever, and it's just something that's going to happen to you sometimes. But
Yeah.
what do you like this card in
Yes.
Standard?
Yeah, so I like this card in standard in a specific deck. So 2 weeks ago we had a deck tech and they played Sultai Snake, right? And one of the problems we talked about Sultai Snake was is that like the deck he wanted to build the deck as an aggressive they wanted to build the deck as like an aggressive Abzan aggro deck, right? But there was not enough tools to really do it. And one of the problems with the card we talked about was like Scarab God, right? Is like this card that you want to play for the late game, and you want to be able to grind value out of and turn your cards like and make threats, but doesn't really fit your game plan. And I think this card works well with Snake. It works well with Hydra, which is a card you could play, and then it does like give you that late game against some decks, right? It turns every threat. Well, it at least increases the amount of pressure a threat has, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like so. It's kind of a grindy card. I guess my nervousness with this is that like it plays pretty well when you're sort of at parity or ahead, but if you fall behind at all, it's very underwhelming.
Well, it helps you catch up, right? If you fall behind, because it gives you a way to like gimp the game in a way,
It
right?
can a little bit, but I worry that like it's often not actually going to be enough to
Matter.
that kind of effect. It doesn't do anything, or it doesn't do nothing. But I worry that like it's not actually going to catch you up in a game you're very far behind in.
Right. So like if you're behind on
Right.
resources and stuff, right, and they're taking up planeswalkers and whatever, you're probably buried. But if you're like racing your opponent and you're behind that way, right, where like they've turned the corner with a Hydra and a Glorybringer, and now they can attack into you, this is a card that will help you start attacking back into them.
I'm just not convinced that it happens fast enough that that's actually true.
But is it so? If you take out the Scarab Gods, right, you're lowering your curve in that deck, and then your snakes will make it pretty easy to flip this quickly. And then, I mean, the only card that really kills a big thing is Harness Lightning or Fatal Push in this standard, right?
Right.
Because all the
Right.
damage is removal is damage. I'm sorry, all the removal is damage based for the most part. So once you have a big thing, it's hard to kill. And then, like you talked about, if you put on a Hydra, for example, you're winning the game in like a turn or two. I
Right.
would. It kind of plays like Keswick Wolf Run, but like way way different. Even though it does, right? Because you don't sink mana, you just double the power of the creature.
So plays. I think it'll play like Keswick Wolf Run, but the difference is there's a much higher cost to playing a card like this than there is to playing a land that does that.
That's true.
Right, because having like one colorless source that you have some way to find with like via Night of the Reliquary or whatever
Primeval Titan.
that right or sure whatever at the end of the game you can dump 10 mana into it and say trample
Hmm.
is so much different than this kind of a thing, and I'm not convinced this card is bad. I just think I think it might end up being trickier to
Pull off.
evaluate, and like it's definitely powerful, but I think it might end up feeling closer to Citadel Siege than to something like Keswick Wolf Run.
And I think it's definitely better than Citadel Siege.
So I think it's likely better than Citadel Siege and Constructed too,
Yes.
but a card could be quite a bit better than Citadel Siege and Constructed and still not be good enough.
That is very true. That's very fair. Well, this is the card that I talked about earlier in the show. I was like, if I'm going to get one wrong, it's going to be way wrong. And I think
But it's
this
an
card will be
interesting
good.
one
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Mhm. And
Yeah,
it
I
is.
mean, I could see this one going either way. It's definitely a powerful effect. I think if the Merfolk deck is good, this card will probably be good.
Yeah. Merfolk and Snake are the only decks that really want to play this. You could put in. I've seen some people talk about Pummeler, but I'm not super sold there. The one good thing about Pummeler is that it's a Pummeler-esque effect, and you already have Trample in those decks, which is nice. And it obviously works really well with
It's
pump
really good with a
spells.
pump spell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you larger than life something, right, then you're just
Yeah, they're
game
gonna
over again.
die.
Yeah, which is good. I feel like the flipping it part is gonna be really hard in that deck. But you do play long test cup and stuff, so it might flip super easily.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like Long Tusk Cub is actually the card that makes me kind of most interested in it because it's actually so easy to get counters on Long Tusk Cub that it feels like you could definitely just have games where like if you're like attuned into Long Tusk Cub into this, it's probably just gonna like flip immediately.
Yeah,
And then, if you can't kill that Long Tusk Cub, you're going to just take 10.
you might be dead if you didn't block like the first two attacks.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe that's...
Yeah.
Right, I mean, maybe that is, sends you leaning towards, like, the Snake deck again. I don't know. It's an interesting card. It's really bad against removal spells.
That's true. Oh, also, it's pretty good with Glint Sleeve Siphoner.
Sure.
Yeah, which is not nothing. So The front half, I should say. Sorry, where you're like making it so it can actually attack Endithopters and
Well,
whatnot.
I mean, Menace flying is just unblockable, so
That is true. In standard,
right.
that is when assign lethal damage. All right,
Yeah, it's cute for sure.
all right. Let's move on to number 10. Number 10 is Dire Fleet Poisoner. For 1 a black, you get a human pirate creature that has Flash Death Touch. Whenever Dire Fleet Poisoner enters the battlefield, target attacking pirate you control gets +1/+1 in Death Touch till end of turn, and it's a 2/2. What do you think, Michael?
I mean, I think Flash Death Touch is just pretty decent.
Ambush Viper.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ambush Viper is like a totally okay Magic card, and this is better than that. So it's not like the most exciting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know. There just isn't really a lot to say about it, right? It's like, again,
It's just like
if we're playing any other pirates, this guy is just totally fine.
Yeah, agreed. I was gonna say it's really just a combat trick or a removal spell most of the time, right?
Yeah, it's like, but you get a Death Touch bear along with it. It's like, it's pretty good.
Well, that's what I meant. Like it's a combat trick the first time, right? Like your 2/2 attacks and their 2/2. You pump it, theirs dies, and then you have a 2/2 that can like attack in or trade with something when they attack in. It's more for limit in that sense, but
yeah, it's an interesting one. I certainly like this card. Is definitely at least decent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it might, like, you don't need that many pirates in your deck for this guy to be okay, at least. But I have a hard time seeing this being. It's just not that impactful unless you can play a pretty aggressive deck.
that's fair. It looks like pirates might be like red black aggressive, which is kind of cool and a different take from what we were seeing in the last set.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this card is good. It's just that, like, it's not very swingy. Like, the kind of standard formats we've seen lately have mostly been about, like, kind of smashing 5-drops into each other.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of card isn't really about that. Like, this kind of card feels a lot more powerful if we're, like, playing tempo-based Magic, and we just haven't really been doing that.
Yeah, so maybe one to keep our eye out on. Side note, I love her art. I think this is a great art. This is the card that like I expect to see cosplayers cosplay. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
It looks
It's
great.
sweet.
Yeah. So if you're at home driving your car, pull out your iPhone, Google Dire Fleet Poisoner, and look, and be in awe. All right. Well,
But don't crash your car.
well, that goes without saying. We're not your parents. Do what you want. All right. I don't think there's anything else to say about this card. Do you?
No, I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, it's solid. If people play Pirates, it'll obviously be good. It's obviously not Eternal Format playable.
Yeah. Play it in your pirate deck. Get them.
Yeah.
All right. All right, Michael. This is the one I'm sure people want to talk about. And this is. Well, I think I'm getting a little bit of echo. Did you still using your headphones? That was weird.
I lifted. No, I just lifted them off my ear for a second, so you probably heard yourself.
Okay. All right. Well, Azori the Lawbringer. It is 2 white blue for a legendary creature Sphinx flying. When Azori the Lawbringer enters the battlefield, each opponent cannot cast instants or sorceries during that player's next turn. And then when Azori attacks, you may pay X white blue blue. If you do, Michael, you gain X life and draw X cards. It's Sphinx's Rev on a creature, Michael. What do you think?
I think it's bad.
Dreams are dead. Yeah, it's.
Do you think this card is good?
No, I just wanted to hype it up. That's my job as the host, is to build them up and then you tear them down. But
I mean, I'm legitimately curious. Like,
So,
is this a card you think?
I don't think it's very good in a control deck. I think you could maybe play this in a Godfarer's Gift deck, because then right, like, you're cheating it, so you can like get it in, and then the turn you put it in, you probably set it up ahead of time with a strategic planning, and then you immediately draw like 2 or 3 cards, and you gain a little bit of life, which is, I don't know if that's something the Godfarer deck really wants to do, but its effect will work with Godfarer's Gift, so they won't be able to cast instants and sorceries, so they might have a hard time answering the gift. I'm not sure.
Kind of, but like, if they have like a braid that's already happening, if they had like a negate, it already had, like, I don't know that this one, like, there's the other, infinite mana 4/8 like 12 keyword card. I think I'm more interested in that with Godfarrow's Gift specifically.
Yes, that one is also very good with Godfarer's Gift. But I I don't know if this card can be good the way Wizard really wanted it, which is like you play this card and it's like Sphinx's Rev, right? And like if the game, if like we talked about earlier with the Perlink Ancient clone, right? Like if the game becomes about that, this is a card that'll just beat you every time. But
How can you ever make a game about this though? Like it can get countered, it can get killed during your turn still.
well, the
And
theory is that you have a counter spell on your turn, right? Like
no, no,
you're,
no, 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 no. It can get killed on the turn you play it.
oh yeah, I know, but I know that, but that you wouldn't play this card till you were sure, right? Where you had to. Like
I mean, but if we're doing that, I could probably kill you with anything, right? Like the whole point of a control finisher is that you don't have to be like so impossibly far ahead the game is over already. Otherwise, what's the point of like gaining life and drawing cards anyways, right? Like we don't need that.
well, first off,
I
drawing cards is always worth it. Don't say such things on this cast, all right?
I don't know. I would be very surprised if this card saw very much play.
Right. I don't think this card is like the end all be all, but it is like a really cool card, right? And it's a card that looks like it could do something in some worlds. I just don't. I agree with you that I think it's going to be very hard for this card to see play. So the only way I see it seeing play is if you're cheating with God Pharaoh's Gift, and that's because you would want the bottom half. You'd want to cheat the way around that. But I just don't know if God Pharaoh's Gift wants that, like at
I
all.
don't think so. Like it's so expensive. I mean, the other thing is that once you have a Godfarer's Gift in play, like the utility of drawing extra cards diminishes a ton. Like what are we hoping to draw into?
I more God Pharaoh's Gift.
I mean, like we're only going to draw like 3 cards during our, and it's going to be like during our main phase, right? So we're going to draw like 3 cards, maybe.
Well, it's
I don't know.
Yeah.
Sure, sure, but I mean, you have a like I mean, what I really mean is like it's sorcery speed, right? We can't like do this on our opponent's end step.
Oh
There's
yeah,
no
sure. There's no trickery to it.
right.
I mean, this card's definitely not actually Sphinx's Rev, but the bottom half of the card is definitely supposed to like invoke, and I mean it is Sphinx's Rev on the bottom half, right? With this card, it plays way differently because it's a creature. You have to wait for it to attack. You have to attack. Then you have to sink mana in when you attack. You don't get to wait till the end of their turn, right? There's just a lot more cost to this card than Sphinx's
Right.
Rev ever had.
I mean, where this card would be good is like a mid-range mirror.
right, but I don't think there's a mid-range deck that plays blue and white cards. Which
Yeah,
is gonna be good.
no, I mean that's
Yeah.
kind of my. This feels like a card that if it was like green and black,
Whoa,
might be good.
green gets more card draw. Now we're talking.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying right.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm just
obviously
messing
maybe this card shouldn't be like, but this card just doesn't do anything in a control deck.
I have a question, Michael. What if it was white, blue, cards the same, but just 4 mana? Is that
I mean, then it would probably be broken.
okay? All right. I just wanted to know, like, if the
I mean,
two-
that's true of like everything, though, right? Like, if we
Yeah.
take any card that's like pseudo playable and make it cost 2 mana less, what if Thragtusk cost 2 and a green? Yeah, I mean, it would be great.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just curious.
And even stuff that's kind of bad, right? Like, no one is really that excited about Inferno Titan, right? But man, if it costs 4 mana, that card would be super broken.
That's fair. Yeah, this is
Or
the-
Frost Titan, or mostly anything. I mean, Scathe Zombies would be pretty good if it just cost black.
All right, Michael, we get it. No, you're right. You're right. I was just asking a fun little question and got destroyed. So yeah, I should probably move on. I don't know. The only time I see this card's good is Godfarer's Gift or a crazy far-flung future.
Yeah, it just seems so much worse than like Angel of Invention to me.
Yeah.
Like, you're mostly trying to kill them, and this card, it's actually just like a 4, right? It's not like that. It's not actually that good at killing your opponent.
Oh, is it good in the mirror because like maybe you stop them from Godfarer's gifting on curve? Is that something?
So it stops from casting instants and sorceries.
So they can't refurbish is like my thinking.
Huh.
So like you would like if you had the play right, maybe a thing where like you can planning and hopefully hit this, then you refurbish, get your gift, get this, then they can't refurbish on the next turn, and you hope to pull ahead.
Or you just try to like chain them together or do some ridiculous garbage like that.
yeah.
I mean, maybe. I
don't
mean,
know.
I feel like if we're talking about a world where Godfarrow's gift mirrors are like one of our main concerns, we've departed so far from any Magic any of us have actually played recently was just kind of like
Listen,
pointless speculation, right? Like, I can't imagine. I don't really have a good answer for that, but I would be surprised if it was something you felt like you needed an answer for anytime soon.
that's fair. Well, I don't know. I just want this card's so sweet. I wish it was better. But yep. All right.
I think the next card is actually really sweet and really good.
Well,
So
let's go into it then, because I was curious to hear what you thought about Tedzamok Primal Death. So 4 black, legendary creature, Elder Dinosaur, Death Touch. You can pay black and reveal this card from your hand. Put a prey counter on target creature. Activate this ability only during your turn. Then, when you cast this card, I'm sorry, when this card enters the battlefield, destroy each card your opponent controlled with a prey counter on it. What do you think, Michael?
this card seems sweet to me.
Yeah.
Like, this card seems like a good control card.
Even though you can only activate it at sorcery speed.
Well, you don't have to, like, okay, so, like, imagine, so you can activate it, like, if your opponent plays, like, a Bomat Courier or whatever, like, so it's obviously not very good when your opponent plays, like, a 1-drop. But if we, like, say on turn 4, we're like, hey, I put a counter on your, 2 of your guys in either a control or a mid-range mirror, and then, you can, like, still hold up some sort of counter spell or whatever, and then turn 5, you're like, hey, put a counter on 2 more guys. It's like, it seems like either it really slows the game down because your opponent gets scared you're going to cast it, or they just keep running things into it, and, as long as you can, like, not die on board, this thing's going to be, like, actually a 7-for-1.
Oh, there's another. So when this enters the battlefield, you destroy each creature. So like if you played this in Godfarer's Gift, going back to that, you could have one in your grave, and then on your turn, like put a bunch of prey counters that Godfarer's Gift and blow them all up too. That's kind of
Well,
cool.
you could do something like that. I think that might end up being just too tricky to work out.
That's
Like, that sounds hard to set up. But just, like, I mean, I don't know, imagine we're playing, like, some sort of just, like, fair mid-rangey matchup, right? And, like, you have some value creatures in play, and I'm like, okay, put a prey counter on this, put a prey counter on this, put a prey counter on this, go. I have 5 mana right now. Next turn I'm going to play this. It's like, you probably just dead,
yeah, that's fair. What do you think about
right?
this card?
Like,
Yeah, sorry, continue.
so you can play it in control, big catch-up card, but you can also play it in a mid-rangey deck where, like, if you're playing a mid-range mirror and you're like, prey counter, prey counter, prey counter, go, you attack me with some stuff because you know it's going to die. Okay, take it, untap, play it, kill your entire board, attack you with my entire board. Like, I don't know. I think this card is just, like, pretty good.
Yeah, you think this is a card that we might see in like Teamer Blackish decks and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I like, maybe not specifically Teamer Black, just because, like, you wouldn't play, like, a Teamer shell with this card because you need so much black mana.
That's fair.
But, like, this feels like a really powerful controller mid-range card to me. Like, it can be a finisher. It's somewhere between a finisher and, like, a big removal spell. But it can be flexible, right? Like, if your opponent doesn't have creatures, a 6 mana 6/6 Death Touch isn't, like, crazy embarrassing. That's, it's going to attack. And if, we're both playing creatures and, like, the attacks aren't looking very good, just, like, wrathing, plague winding your opponent, even if it costs, 11 mana over 2 turns, is, like, you're not coming back from that.
That's true. So, Michael, here's a real question. How many of these are me and Danny going to lose to at the Team GP in 2 weeks?
Oh, man. This card is going to be impossible to beat in Limited.
Yeah?
Right?
So
Like,
everyone?
you just can't, because every single game is going to look like that, like, mid-range thing I just described, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're just going to be staring at each other with, like, a bunch of trained Armadons, and you're going to be, and either you or your opponent's going to be like, okay, I choose these 4 of yours, untap, make a 6/6 Death Touch that kills 4 creatures when it ETBs.
All right. Yeah.
Right? Like, that's
Yeah,
not a card you could really beat. It's, like, Mega Glorybringer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I exert on your side of the board.
It's kind of like a Titan in that way, right? Like Titans are
Yeah.
basically unbeatable and limited, even like stab
Yeah.
like one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you're, like, realistically good. Your opponent has to be dead. The only way you can beat this card in, like, a we both play creatures matchup is if your opponent is dead.
Yep.
right?
Yep.
If they like just put counters on a bunch of, you're not beating 6/6 Plague Wind. That's not happening.
Agreed. Well, let's move on to the next card, Michael. We think we've talked enough about Big Papa Ortiz here, and let's talk about
So
us.
just sorry,
Oh yeah,
one more thing. So one of the things I do really like about it is it also just allows you to use all your mana. Like one of the things that you think, oh, this card is so expensive to use, but like if on turn 3 you can put one counter on something and play a 2-drop, and turn 4 you like play a 4, or turn 4 rather you play a 4-drop or whatever, so you don't use any. But turn 5 you only have a 3-drop to play again. You get like a 2, like I think it's going to end up, even though it looks like you have to spend a lot of mana, it's not going to end up always feeling like you have to spend a lot of mana.
yeah. Well, also one thing that people to like harp on that point is like people are like, oh, how are you gonna put all these counters on these creatures? Or like, well, how is your opponent playing all these creatures, right? That like you actually
Well,
want to Tezamon.
I mean, or you like top deck it on turn 11 in a deck with a bunch of black mana, and you're just like, put 4 counters on things, 6/6, kill 4 of your things, go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just talking about like in the curve situation where you play this on 6, your opponent like at most, right, not kind of like Thopter from Virtuoso, can only have like 5 or 6 if you were on the draw. And how many of those do you really need to kill in order to win, right?
Right. I mean, how many of
Yep.
those are going to beat a 6 touch? That's like really not that easy.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's funny
I
this card is
totally
Death
agree.
Touch. Yeah. It always trades. That's funny. All right.
Yeah, it seems really good to me. I would be very surprised if that wasn't one of the better cards in the set.
All right, let's move on to the next one then. This is a card that's getting a lot of mixed talk from what I've heard, and this is Angarth the Flame Chained. He is 3 black red, Planeswalker. Each opponent discards a card and loses 2 life for +1. You -3 to gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap it, it gains haste until end of turn, and then you sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step if it was 3 mana or less. And then -8 for its ultimate. Each opponent loses life equal to the number of cards in their graveyard, and it starts at 4 loyalty.
Okay, so the ultimate is nonsense,
Yes.
right? We're just like, we're never doing that. That's
Unless it's
not.
exactly lethal, yeah.
I mean, it might be lethal sometimes, but like, we're not getting a 5 mana thing that doesn't really protect itself to 8. That's just not happening.
Yeah, well, except against control decks. But yeah, I feel you. I feel what you're saying. Keep going.
Sure. I mean, yeah, if they can't kill it but I mean, the thing is, like, the secret is like, if you actually plus this 4 times, your opponent couldn't possibly have won the game anyways. So I don't know why we even care.
That's true.
Right? If you play like 5 mana and it sits in play for 4 turns, they're like, yeah, you lost, but you didn't lose this game to ultimate. You lost this game because I had a Planeswalker for
5 turns, yeah.
way too long. Yeah. So the thing I don't like about this card is that it doesn't protect itself except from really specific cards.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I like that you can like, the thing is that I don't think Threaten is actually better than just destroy target creature.
Yeah.
And I don't think each opponent discards a card and loses 2 life is nearly as good as draw a card. So given that Obnixilis was, I think this card is like substantially worse than Obnixilis.
Yeah. I wish it dealt damage, and like you dealt 2, so you could like at least ping walkers or something. But I agree with you. Like it does seem like a harder to cast, worse Obnixilis.
Yeah, this card is good.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I'm missing something. Like, it's good against control decks, but every Planeswalker is good against control.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe like that black deck that splashed Hazoret will put this in its sideboard. But besides that, I mean, I don't really see it seeing a whole lot
Yeah,
of play.
I mean, the problem is that you're basically never going to get to threaten to use the second ability twice.
Yeah,
like,
that's like impossible.
If
Use
a
one
deck
hand,
has a bunch, if a deck has things with like less than 3 CMC, I mean, it gives you a mode, but like, I'm trying to think. So like, when would this be better than just destroying a creature, right? So like, we're playing against mono red and they have like a rampaging Ferocidon, right? And we take it and attack them with it. Like, is that even better than just killing it? Not really, right? It's like mostly 6s.
Yeah, it has minor upside, but the fact that it doesn't always get in for 3 damage or doesn't always kill is not worth the trade-off.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Because like, if we have to take a Glory Bringer, like, it's super awkward that we don't just get to kill it.
Yeah.
Right.
Agreed.
Like, I just don't think this card is very good.
Yeah. Agreed. We'll probably see some sideboard stuff, but
I mean, it's a planeswalker, but I think this is like like red black Dovanbon or whatever.
The planeswalkers in this set are really like watered down. Like,
I'm mostly good with that. I think that this is a direct response to Gideon being like really really unfun.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, I kind of wish Huatley got more votes so we could talk about her because she's interesting to me, even though I think she's also not good. She's just
Is
more
that the one
interesting.
that pluses that its plus ability puts more loyalty on it?
Yeah, for each creature you have.
Oh god, yeah, that's just like not.
It's
It's
not
just
like a
not a real Magic card.
yeah, it's not like
You
a competitor
can't
card, but
you
it's cool.
can't do that. Yeah, I mean it's amusing,
Yeah,
but it's bad, right?
yeah. Well, so is like this thing, but I can have more fun talking about that one than I can this. They're
No,
like nearly
true.
like
Like at least
connected.
it's kind of funny.
Yeah, and I can like think of cool things where it's like, oh yeah, like play it in my token deck, I just immediately minus and bop, you're dead.
We're immediately plus and like shoot. I mean, if is there anything that like gives you a bonus for having 85 loyalty?
Not currently, but in 5 years when we have the all planeswalker set, there might be. So here we go.
Perfect.
Yeah,
All right.
I can tell you're
So
excited
next
for the
up
all
we have
planeswalker set.
yeah, just what I've always wanted. Next up we have Silvergill Adept, which is a reprint. Um, I guess. I mean, I don't think there's really that much to say about this card. Like, it's a good Merfolk, but it doesn't solve any of my like questions about the deck, which is basically, we have a bunch of 2-drops and like I don't know what removal spells we're playing or how we're building a curve or anything like that.
Yeah, I don't know if Merfolk
But
has
but
enough.
but it's a good card.
Yeah, it's
It's a good
good.
card.
And at first I was like, oh sweet, they reprinted this card for prices, but the card was also like apparently pennies. So I wonder if maybe they thought that card would get more expensive too. I don't know. It's nice to have this card though. Like you're gonna play
Yeah,
it in all your Merfolk decks every time.
yeah. It looks totally fine. Yeah. I mean, but there's not really a lot to say about it, right? Like
Yep.
it's a good card.
If you're building your Merfolk deck, start with this 4 of. All right. Moving on.
Problem is that when we were talking about this Merfolk deck, we have like 20 2-drop Merfolk or whatever.
We're the mono twos deck, Michael. Twos for life. All right. That,
Perfect.
yep. That's just all I ever wanted. It was only to play 2/2s and 2/1s for 2. But what about Kamuna, Tyrant of? I don't know. You said it earlier. Orazka.
Kumena, Tyrant of Orazka.
That's why we pay you the big bucks, Michael. It is a 1 blue and a green legendary creature, Merfolk Shaman. Tap another untapped Merfolk. This creature gets unblockable. Tap 3 Merfolk you control to draw a card. And then you tap 5 Merfolk, and all your Merfolk get a +1/+1 counter on them. So this kind of rewards playing all the 2-drops, right? Like you build
Kind
up a board
of.
and you go. It's like so. It's like Relentless Dead. Now come at me
It
and
is.
hate me.
This card is no. I kind of see that. Like it's like one of those cards where it's like Relentless Dead and Crypt Breaker kind of had a baby, right?
Crypt Breaker.
You're
I'm
like
sorry, that was the
somewhere
card I was
between
thinking
those.
of. Yeah, yeah.
Well, no, but it's like it just kind of like Relentless Dead. It kind of gives you this inevitability. I mean, I guess Crypt Breaker. It ends up you end up looking like zombies, except that you don't have any removal spells.
Yeah.
So I'm not like really sure how good that is.
I really think they're trying to push that 2/3 card. And like I think they want you to like build a board kind of like zombies, but instead of like killing stuff to like push a way through, right? You just get unblockable and move and you kill them quicker, right? Because
Yeah, I mean the problem is that like Dark Salvation was like a lot. Dark Salvation was the best card in that deck by a substantial margin.
yeah,
And we don't have anything close to that kind of power level.
that's true. We don't have Merfolk Salvation, although that would be a sick card.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really like the
Like
idea of this card.
so it's kind of cool. I guess my problem is this. So when we tap 3 Merfolk to draw a card, what are we drawing?
Another Merfolk Silver God.
Right, like we're just drawing like more 2/2s.
Yeah.
And like they put counters on stuff, but like there's no one of the things that playing a bunch of energy decks spoils you with is that your energy do different things, right? So you can kind of pivot. Like if you're playing like Glintsleeve Siphoner, your energy can draw you cards. If you're playing Longtail Scuff, it can be counters. If you're playing Whirler Virtuoso, it makes 1/1s. If you're playing Bristling Hydra, it gives your guy hexproof or whatever. And like you are sort of trying to use this resource in all these different ways. Where here, it's just like it's very one note,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I can't imagine how we're building this deck that we're not just like losing to Fumigate a lot,
Yeah, but
or losing to just creatures a lot, right? I mean, like it seems very hard to build a deck in a way that both you can like outswarm Teamer Energy and not just get Raft.
yeah, you're just gonna have to pack your sideboard with like a bunch of negates and stuff and pierces
Yeah,
and hope that's
yeah, and I
enough.
mean, we can do that, right? You
Yeah.
can play a bunch of negates in your sideboard, but then it's like, so why am I playing this deck instead of Teamer Energy?
Right.
Because
Agreed.
like the cards are just they're very like one dimensional.
Yeah.
Like they don't themselves to flexible games of Magic, and when you have decks that are really inflexible, they generally have to be incredibly powerful to really be playable.
Yeah, I agree with that statement a lot.
So like this card, it does a lot of really powerful things, but like it basically can never end a game quickly.
Yeah.
Like it's so hard to actually like. So even if you have 5 Merfolk, 5 is a lot,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you're usually not going to be able to activate the last ability, certainly not multiple times before this dies, or your opponent was dead without this. You could have just attacked them.
Yeah. You also
And
have to
like
want that over drawing your card.
right, and like when we're drawing, like, but what are we drawing? We're drawing lands and 1 drops and 2 drops. Like I don't know what those. I just don't know what that does for us.
So we're drawing cards to put more Merfolk so we can put counters on them. Then we play the 2/3 unblockable and kill them. I'm really
Right,
pushing this
but
2/3 narrative.
yeah,
Like it's like
yeah,
it's the only card that makes sense to me, right? Like you get all these +1/+1s, which because like the reason I keep pushing it is right. It's not because I think like that card's insane. I just don't know how you win with Merfolk without it, because like sure you can like maybe
well,
curve on people and
on
whatnot.
efficiency, right? Like
Yeah,
I think you just put counters on things and you just race them to
but I don't think you're gonna beat
being
Teamer
able to
doing that.
block very well. Well,
I don't think
I
you're
don't
gonna
think
beat
you're gonna.
anything
I
doing
don't think
that.
you're gonna beat Teamer with a 2/3 flyer or with a 2/3 thing that makes all your things with counters. Like that's just so inefficient.
Well, right, but the idea is that it's like you would play it and it's like a falter almost, right? And then you just like push through the damage so that like you were racing them, kind of like what you were talking about. The problem is, and we keep talking about this,
Yeah.
is that like Merfolk, all of them do the same thing, right? Like they just are a bunch of 2/2s and like 2/1s, and they draw
Oh,
cards and
and
make
they're
one kill.
good, right?
Yeah,
Like they're like efficiently costed, and like there's a bunch of stuff where you look at it, and you're like, yeah, this is a good Magic card. But then this is the same problem Merfolk has in Modern, right?
yeah,
Like there's for a deck like Merfolk almost can't be well positioned because if Merfolk is actually the best deck, the metagame that's been created is horrible.
yeah. That's fair.
Right? Like you think the all Teamer Energy metagame is bad? I can tell you that at least Teamer Energy, there are choices you make in decks that are impactful, and if we're all just playing Merfolk, like we're literally just playing the exact same cards.
Yes, yeah.
And most of these cards don't have any activated abilities.
And yeah, it isn't like Teamer where like you have another resource to manage in a mode in the game.
No, right? No, it's
You're
just
just
like
slamming into each other.
right. We just play bears, and then whoever draws more Anthem bears wins.
Yeah,
Like that. That's just not good.
yeah, yeah. I don't know.
I think that card is like it's kind of powerful,
Yeah,
but you need Merfolk that are like more utility Merfolk, and we have a bunch of Merfolk that are like Anthem Merfolk.
yes, yeah. And maybe Dominaria will have Merfolk, right? Like
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
super big on what the creature types over there are, but that's the hope. I
It's just
think.
hard to say. It's
Yeah,
just hard to say.
yeah. I don't know. Maybe in a year this is a card we're playing a bunch of, but for right now, I think it'll be fine. Just like that's the thing, right? Like we're low on it, but only because team are so high, right? Like the bar is so up here that like decks that are like normally fine and passable just probably aren't good enough.
Yeah, well, and I mean more than that, it's like I don't think these Merfolk look interesting.
Well, I mean, they do, yeah. Like I can see how they are interesting for some people, but I also see like why you and I are not super interested in
Well,
them.
okay, if you like Merfolk because they're named Merfolk,
Well, no, I just
cool.
meant some people like decks that just curve out and beat down, right? Like that's something that some people find appealing and attractive to them.
Right, but just having like every card kind of do the same thing is just like I think just generally makes for unexciting games of Magic.
Right, I agree with you, but there are some people out there that really like it when all their cards do the same thing and are really redundant and repetitive, and they can like,
Sure.
yeah,
So, okay, what I can say is I can appreciate that that's sometimes a good competitive strategy,
hmm
but you don't want to play a bunch of mirrors where, like, I don't think anyone wants to play 100 Merfolk mirrors if the only thing that Merfolk do are, like, Lord style effects.
that's fair. Yeah,
We need Merfolk that, like, do different things, right?
yes, yeah. I do think that
There
would be
needs to
better.
be some choice and, like, more utility beyond just well, this one makes them bigger, and this one also makes them bigger, and this one also makes them bigger, and this one draws a card.
Yeah.
It's like playing, all zombie mirror matches. Basically, it's just not that interesting.
Yep. Well, let's move on to the next one, Michael. I think we talked enough about that. And this is a kind of interesting card. So this is Twilight Prophet. It's 2 black black for a vampire cleric, flying ascend. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have the city's blessing, reveal the top card of your library and put it in your hand. Each opponent loses X life, and you gain X life, where X is the converted mana cost, and it's a 2/4. So it's Bob that your opponent pays the cost, and you gain the life back. What do you think?
Do you think this card is good?
No, not really, but I think it's really exciting. And my job, once again, is to hype the card, then you tear it down. So,
It's okay. It's interesting though. Like my big is that it seems difficult to get ascend in a deck that has a relatively high curve.
yeah, I think it's just more the Bob thing and like nickel and dime stuff is the idea.
Well, but I mean, you could play it in like a control deck, right?
Yeah, sure, where your lands or your ascend, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, you could do something like that. I mean, it's a long time to get to actually 10, and maybe that's just too many. But you could play it in like a bigger mid range, something like where your average CMC wouldn't, be 1 or whatever.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because if we play it in like tokens, I mean, it'll flip quickly, but it also,
Although in tokens, it wouldn't be the worst, right? There's a decent amount of 4s in that deck.
Well, my question then is like, how often are you getting to 10 permanents before you've already kind of assembled your engine and this doesn't do anything?
Not a
Right,
whole
like,
lot. Yeah,
yeah, that's sort of my issue with this card. Like, it's really cool, but it seems really hard to get the city's blessing in decks where, like, I want the city's blessing, or like I want my ascend cards to do something that seems good with having a bunch of permanents, and this card doesn't really do that. Like, if you play it in control, you're just actually playing a 4 mana 2/4 that can't do anything until turn 9, right?
hmm
So that seems like a tough sell, I guess.
yeah. So to try and be positive on this card, right? And the reason I do try and like, it's I
Yeah,
joke that
it's
like
it's it's no, it's just it's interesting. Like I'm
yeah.
trying to figure out
Well, I
where
think
this
there's a
fits that
vampire.
it's most powerful.
I think it might be Vampire Tribal, right? Is like the idea for this card, and it's a way for you to generate card advantage and stay in the game against other decks. Because there's another vampire that's like a 5 mana 3/3 where you lose X life and draw X cards, where X is the number of vampires, right? And there's clearly a lot
Okay.
of cards like what's the Archbishop or the Deacon, right? Like when you attack, you get a vampire token. Legion's Landing is It's 2 cards for
Oh,
ascent.
Maverin Fane.
Yeah, Maverin Fane, and then Legion's Landing, right? Because that's an enchantment and a token, so that's 2, right?
Or like Oketra's Monument or
Yep,
anything.
Aketra's Monument.
There's
There's
stuff you
there's
could
a
play
lot
kind
of
of like that.
incidental stuff. Yeah, so I think this card
Yeah.
is meant to do that, and I just once again it's kind of like Merfolk. I just don't think that's going to be good enough, but I think that's where it could be good, and I think it's a lot easier to like. I think it's more important that we talk about the upsides because we can rag on any of these cards and make them not sound good. But I think the only place in the current standard where this will see play is a vampire stack. And I think to your point where you want your ascend cards to work with a lot of permanents, I think the vampire deck does do that, and I think you get rewarded for doing that.
Yeah, then the biggest problem is just that it's a 4 mana 2/4, right? Like it would be a lot better if this was like
An enchantment.
either slightly cheaper, so it was like a 3 mana 1/3, or it was an enchantment, or like if it was either harder to kill or attacked better.
Right.
Because
Well,
yeah,
then we have a
drawing.
crazy card though, right? Like an
Well,
insane card.
it would be very good, but
I
again,
yeah,
nothing wrong with having cards that are really powerful.
that is true. There's nothing wrong with having good
I
cards, but
it just feels like my issue mostly is that in a lot of have like 10 permanents in play, it's likely that we don't need a lot more snowballing effects.
well, board states
Like
stall out.
things are so they do stall out, and this card is good in a board stall, but it still dies pretty easily
Mm-hmm.
because it's just a creature.
Yeah.
It's not particularly cheap, so you probably can't play more than like 2, right?
Yeah.
Like you're probably not playing like this doesn't feel like a card you're probably playing 4 of to me.
Yeah, I mean it's no Bob, right? Like that's the quickest comparison because it has the Bob-esque effect, but it is not Bob by any
Well,
means.
I think so. I think the drain is actually better than the card draw.
Oh, interesting. Okay. See, I think the card draw is better because
I think it's
like
too hard to make it draw cards.
well, you wait. Does it always
I-
flip a card? I thought it only flips if you have the city's blessing. At the beginning, upkeep if you have the city's blessing. Yeah. Am I
Right.
misunderstanding what you're saying?
No, I'm saying I think it's too hard to make it draw. Like you can't think of this as a card draw engine because things have to be going pretty well for you if you're putting them in a lower to the ground deck.
Okay.
So like
Oh,
I think
I
the
see.
fact that that's flying and can maybe, poke in for a couple of points of damage plus, flip a removal spell and drain your opponent for 3 and that like it can sort of have like a I mean, I hesitate to say this because it's, like a lot worse, but like a Glorybringer style. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
I know what you mean.
it can like
Sorry, I just
provide
audibly
some
laughed.
reach. Yeah, it
Yeah.
can like kind of provide some reach in some of those same spots.
Yeah, and the board stalls, which is another moment when we talk about winning this, that is good, right? Like you play this, it'll help you draw cards to get out of the board stall, and it forces them to act, right? Because
it
you're
does.
yeah.
It's just not that hard to actually act against this card.
Yes, that's true.
You know what I mean? Because it doesn't draw. If it was like also if you have the city's blessing, this happens on ETB or something.
Or end of turn. The beginning
Yeah.
and the end. Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Well,
Because you
for
don't have
just the end. Because the problem is you have to have it sit in play for a whole turn while you have 10 permanents. So like we can basically say against a control deck, if your opponent is playing a control deck, that's pretty much never going to happen for you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like that's just not works. If you're just sitting with things in play, like they were probably dead.
Oh well, one thing to mention too is that once you get Ascend, Michael, and once you have the City's Blessing, you keep it. So there are like cards that you play in this deck earlier that might get you the Blessing. Then you might get Wrath. Then you might play this and you have the Blessing. That is worth mentioning.
Right. So, but
I'm not
I
saying
think
I'm not
if you're
saying that makes
looking at
better,
it
I'm just,
like
yeah, it's worth mentioning.
it's that so that is a thing that can happen, but I think if you're looking at like consistently how this is going to play out,
Mm-hmm.
you are rarely going to get the city's blessing and have this card in play against the deck that is primarily, disallows and fumigates.
Yeah, that's fair.
Right? I mean, I think that's a pretty safe assumption because I mean, obviously, if you keep this card in play for like 3 turns with the city's blessing, you've just won the game with just this.
Yeah.
Which is kind of why one of my thoughts was maybe like control initially, or like some big mid-rangey deck. Because this card's like pretty powerful if you were just like 6 or 7 lands and a few creatures, or a search for Azcanta. That like there are some ways that this card could be really powerful, but it's a little bit tricky. Like nothing comes to mind as like super obvious. This
Yeah,
is what
no
this
slam
deck goes
dunks.
in. Yeah, but it is really powerful. I mean, if you're actually flipping cards off this, your opponent is definitely losing.
Yeah. Well, in a year when we're playing Merfolk Mirrors, this will be the breaker of the tides. Some would say.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, if we end up in a standard where we're playing like a lot of games that are drawn out in board stalls, this card is insane.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because
Agreed.
it's like it's not legendary, so you can actually play multiples.
Which is kind of dumb, but yeah, it feels like a legendary card.
I mean, I think it's like I think this card will also be quite good in limited.
Oh yeah.
For what it's like, you just get into a board stall and you have a flyer that like also domes your opponent every turn.
Yeah.
But this one's close. Like I don't like this as well as some of the others, but it's definitely splashy. Like if you're actually getting this to go for you, your opponent is not having a good time.
Agreed. All right, well, let's move on. We spent a lot of time talking about this card. Let's talk about
Yeah, it's a weird one though,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Oh, it's a cool one. It's exciting. But we're pushing 2 hours here, so I know Spencer was gonna get it like, oh, what's going on? So Rekindling Phoenix is 2 red for a creature Phoenix flying. And then when Rekindling Phoenix dies, Michael, you get an 0/1 elemental creature token with at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice the token and return Rekindling Phoenix from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste until end of turn.
I think this card is good.
Yep, agreed. I
Like, it's like so. Like Ash Cloud Phoenix was decent, and I think this card is better than Ash Cloud Phoenix.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It. I wish it had haste in the front half because then I know it's a slam dunk.
Okay, yes.
But
If it had
yes,
haste on the front half, this card would be insane.
yes, it is. It is good though, and it might be a thing where there are so many good red cards right now that we can't quite play it. But this card's definitely going to see play in its standard life. I would be really surprised if it didn't. Say it that way, because there is Hazoret, there is Chandra, there is like those kind of cards are competing for its spot right now, right? So like I can't see a red deck that's primarily red wanting to play this. I don't know why Team Energy would play this over other cards, really. So
No, but at some point this card is going to see play.
yeah.
Like I could see this seeing play in like a Ramanap Red style deck too.
Oh, like Ben S's deck. That'd be one that might want it. The one that has,
Yeah,
like
like
trigger
just
map.
something like slightly bigger. But this card is like it's I don't know exactly. It feels a lot like Ash Cloud Phoenix, like some kind of mid rangey deck. If there's just a lot of spot removal in the front, this card is really good.
Yep.
I think like it's just solid, right? There's nothing like I can't think of anything crazy to do with this, but it's a 4/3 flying for 4, which is fine, and then your opponent has to kill it twice.
Which is good.
And when it comes back, it has haste. I mean, it's like they're mostly just getting attacked by it every turn. I think this card's really good.
Yeah. I probably won't see play now. It will see play later, and the art's amazing. That's really all I have to say about it.
I think this card could see some play now. I think like in the top end of like
You gonna play
I don't.
Chandra?
I think this card is very good.
Okay. Well, they
It's
also might
different than
spawn an
Chandra,
archetype,
but
right? Well, I know it's different than Chandra, like obviously, but they are in the same exact mana cost, is what I was implying. So they're
yeah, but
fighting
this
for
card
visuals.
can't get attacked at all, right? Like
Yeah,
it works
it does.
differently.
It gets glory breed, but yeah.
it doesn't really get Glorybringer. This card lines up pretty well against Glorybringer, actually.
Well, they glory bringer it, and then they use the actual removal spell to finish it off, right? So like, yeah, it wasn't great, but you're
I
only
mean-
down time. You're not down cards, right? You still 1 for 1, even though your glory bringer did have to exert.
Well, but if this is a Chandra instead, Glorybringer just attacks it and kills something else, right? I mean,
Right.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
this
that's
card
right.
actually lines up extremely well against Glorybringer.
Yeah, I mean they have to use work to kill it. I don't know. I'm just
No, I mean because you just can't even attack unless you have a second removal spell, right? If
well,
you exert on it, it like doesn't. You have to be winning the race already to exert on this.
that. Yeah, sure, that's fair. Yeah, because you're just tapping it. Really, that's all that's happening if you exert.
You're only tapping it during their
Yeah, just during
attack
their
you
turn.
and then attack you again,
Yeah.
right? Like it really doesn't get Glorybringer very well at all. I think that's one of the biggest appeal. When I look at this card, one of the biggest things that I love about it is that it doesn't like Glorybringer lines up horribly against this,
Yeah, like
which is weird, right? I mean, one of the best things about Glorybringer has been that it like just smashes all the other flyers, but this one, if you're not ahead in life already, the fact that you have to exert and then they get it back with haste for you, and now your Glorybringer's still tapped and they have the 4/3 again, like it's super awkward.
Yes, that part of it is awkward. I think that what's going to happen a lot of times is that you've already attacked with Rekindling Phoenix, and then they're going to play Glorybringer attack, and then you might hold it back on D and be like, look at me, like, what are you going to do? And then they're going to exert, and then, like, Harness Lightning or a Braid or something.
Maybe, or you just, but if you're playing an aggressive deck, you just keep attacking, and it's more just something that can't really be exerted on, right?
That's fair. Yeah, I guess
Like because if I'm the attacker, it's not a to Glorybringer exert and Harness Lightning it. That's great for me. right? If I have like this and a rampaging Ferocidon,
Yeah, that's true.
and you're like, well, I'm not going to kill your rampaging Ferocidon because I have to kill this stupid bird. That's great.
That's fair.
I think this card's really good.
Yeah. I'm not sold on it, but I am higher on it than when we started.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just think like it forces your opponent, actually forcing your opponent to have two spells now. Like, so Ash Cloud Phoenix was pretty decent, and this you never have to reinvest mana into.
Yeah, that's a big difference.
That's the big difference. That like, there's no way they're ever going to just kill it. It basically is never going to actually be a 0/1 because they're never going to kill it unless they can kill it twice.
Yeah, and then it's 2 for 1.
But there are going to be a lot of the times where it's like it's bad scenarios are you. So the only way it's bad, you play it and they can ignore it, or you play it and they 2 for 1 it but can still beat you anyways. And like those aren't that easy, right? That's like that sounds like a good card to me. It's also insane against sweepers.
Yes, it is very good against
Like
sweepers.
this card makes Fumigate look stupid.
Yeah.
And
Agreed
that's not nothing. So I don't know. I'm pretty high on this one.
All right. Well, let's move on to the next one here for time's sake. I think we could probably keep going on this one, but it is interesting. I am higher. I am higher. On
Yeah, it's I think it's like I didn't think it was that good either, but I started talking through like actual scenarios of how removal spells play out against it, and it's just like really awkward.
Yeah, that's true. It's one of those things when you get down, like I wouldn't be surprised if like I had played against that card and came to the same stuff you did.
Yeah,
I just hadn't
well,
given enough
right,
credit.
because you start considering exactly like how these patterns actually work, and you're basically it's always going to 2 for 1 you.
Yep. All right, let's move on to Direfleet Daredevil. This card I'm really excited to talk about. It's 1 red, creature, human, pirate, first strike. When Direfleet Daredevil enters the battlefield, exile target instant or sorcery from an opponent's graveyard. You may cast it this turn. You may spend mana as though it's mana of any color to cast that spell. If you whip from the graveyard this turn, exile it instead. So, Michael, it is the red Snapcaster Mage. You play it, and you cast a card from their graveyard.
It's the baby of Gonti and Snapcaster Mage.
Yes, yeah.
Gonti and Snapcaster. The child of Gonti and Snapcaster Mage. This seems so bad to me.
Right, yeah, it's not good, but it's so cool.
I mean, it's like kind of interesting, but like
it's like a red sideboard card in older formats, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's good in so. This card is weird, right? Like it's good in the mirror.
Yeah.
Right. If we're playing like a red mirror, this card is insane. But and like it might just be good enough because like if you're playing against Teamer, like I don't know. I guess I'll take your Harness Lightning or
your coup.
Your Attune with Aether or something. I don't know. Like it's like
I wish it had Flash. If it had Flash, it'd be so good. But
if it had Flash, okay, but Flash First Strike is secretly better than okay. If it had Flash First Strike, it would be the nuts.
Yes, if it had Flash First Strike, it might. Yes, it would be insane. I just wanted to have Flash so I can like have battles with Snapcasters. But
I just like okay, so this card is like it's just all or nothing, right? Like when this card is insane, it's going to be completely ridiculous, insane in limited, right?
Yes,
like in limited, this card is fantastic. And I mean, the more I think about it, like it's often going to be weirdly okay. You're playing like a control deck and you're flooding out, and you're like, I'll cast your Glimmer of Genius, I guess.
Yeah, that's true.
Right, like, you can do some weird, cool things with this, and it's a 2/1 first strike for 2, so it's not like the rate is like atrocious. But yeah. I don't think this card is like a slam dunk.
So the reason I say that I think it's not that good is that like that exact thing where some matchups it lines up really well, and it's never truly terrible. There's just you don't really want this kind of card all the time in matchups. Sometimes, like when it's the thing you want to be doing, it's great, but the rest of the time it's just kind of fine, which is not the thing I really want in my cards. I'm more interested though to hear the Mardu Pyromancer deck, right? In Modern, have you seen that one? Do you think? This is
I played that a bunch.
Yeah, do you think? Oh, so you've played that a bunch. Awesome. Is this a card you're interested in for that? Because I've never played that deck, but I thought they might want this.
I don't think so.
Okay, all right.
I don't know. Like this card, just like when you ask me, okay, so what does this card actually do? Your answer basically has to be, I really don't know. You don't know. Like your game one, you sit down and roll dice, and you open your hand, and it has like 2 of these, and you're like, what is this card?
It's a Hearthstone card. It transforms.
it's like a yeah it's just like a nonsense card, right? That being said, you're gonna play games where this card is ridiculous. Like I don't know, maybe this card is main deckable just because it like generates value, but it feels more like a mid-range card than like a or like even a control card than like a like a Ramanap red card, right?
Yeah, but I could also see, but I think it's like all the cards, which makes me think it might actually be really good because I think Raven Up Red just wants it in the sideboard for against like the Glimmer decks, like you're talking about, right? As like a way to refuel and whatnot.
What about for the mirror?
Yeah, that's true too in the mirror, right? Like you can like they Chandra's defeat, then you're like, all right, play this Chandra's defeat.
Yeah,
Your
I'll
thing.
take so right, which is like so. Is this card just good in every matchup?
Maybe this card's
Maybe
great. I think we talked ourselves into like we've done a full 180 on this card, but
no. Like
I don't know. The more we talk about it, I'm
I
happier.
feel like I've done a full 720 on this card. I feel like I get spun around a lot talking about it, but I'm not really sure where I end up. I did, did a full 720 and then fell on my face. It just like I
Man,
this is a card that I'm gonna have to play with. Having not played any games with this, I have no idea.
and you have to play a lot of games too, right? Because
Well, yeah, it's so high variance.
hmm
Right, I mean, Snapcaster Mage, like, you build your deck with Snapcaster Mage in mind, right? Like, you're trying to play, like, more ones and more twos and less, fours and whatever, because it's really hard. This card, like, the body isn't, like, the body isn't very good.
hmm
So, how good would Recoup be if it could only target cards in your opponent's graveyard and it only costs either 1 or 0 mana?
I don't know because it matters
Is that a card?
matchup to matchup. It's a card I might
Right.
play. Yeah.
Is that a card you'd be like trying to main deck a bunch? I don't know. Again, I'm not saying this card is bad. I'm just saying like I have no idea how to evaluate this.
I'm gonna look up this card's
It's
price
just
right
like
now from our sponsor. You keep talking.
It's looking on TCG. You can get them for like about $7.
That's like just for at the range. I could get bent, or I could be the one bending. Like
Yeah, right. No, but it's not. It's not a mythic. It's just a rare. So
oh, it's just a oh, it was so fancy. I thought it was a mythic. Okay,
no, it
that's
feels like a mythic. It has
Yeah.
like a lot of text.
yeah, a lot of weird
a lot of
text.
weird text. Like you just don't. This card is when you really want like Hearthstone RNG in your Magic deck.
Yeah, that's true. I
Like,
will.
I just don't know. It's cool, and I can imagine it being really good, but it's not really a 2-drop. And the problem is even more than its effects being different in every match. Its CMC is kind of different in every match, right? Like when you're
Yeah.
playing a slower deck, this is way more like a 5 or a 6-drop than it is a 2-drop. Whereas when you're playing a mirror, like it's
like a
often
3-drop.
going to be like it's going to be 3 mana Necrotal mostly, right? Like you're just like flashback a shock or a lightning strike or
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. I might get these from the Mana Base, our sponsor.
it's kind of sweet though,
Yeah.
right? Like it's cool. I appreciate looking at cards where you look at them and you're just like, is this good? I actually don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. My gut's saying, yeah, the high variance isn't something I want main deck. Because to me, I think it's totally 100% at least a sideboard card in some decks. My question is the card good enough that I can put it main deck in decks? And that's the part where I'm really lost on.
I think you could main deck less than 4. I don't think you could main deck 4. Again, I'm willing to eat crow on this one because
Yeah.
this card is like certainly powerful, right? It's kind of like Abbott, but it's like Abbott with more selection, but sometimes all your choices are bad.
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Like
Uh,
I don't know. It's just super hard for me to evaluate. Like, what does this card do? I don't really know. It's a 2/1 first strike, except when it's not.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on for time's sake here. I think
Okay.
we can talk about this card for 10 more minutes, but
That card's sweet though. That
Uh,
card's sweet.
yeah.
Like that's a card I want to try.
Is it fair to say that's like probably your most excited card from the new set?
I mean, it's certainly the card that the more I think about it, the less sure I am.
Okay, which is exciting.
I was sure. I was sure it was bad, and then we started talking, and I was like, "Well, oh, maybe that's good."
You know what might also be good, Michael? Blood Sun, 2 in a red, enchantment. When Blood Sun enters the battlefield, draw a card. Sign me up. Just draw a card. And then all lands lose all abilities except mana abilities.
Do you think this card is good?
I don't know. It's my job to hype up cards too.
No. But like,
Yeah.
legitimately, do you think this
Like,
card is good?
I think it has purpose as a sideboard card sometimes in Modern. If there are certain decks like Valakut is a deck you want to have game against. So like you talked about before the show that like Grixis can play this card right and not hurt their mana base, and then have game against lands and Legacy. The same thing is true for Grixis in Modern against Valakut. It seems
Yeah.
fine, and it is nice to have this in Standard where like if that green black land we talked about an hour ago now, right, ever takes over, it's like, well, we have an answer to it, right? Like, worst case worst, it just becomes a rainbow land. So
Yeah, I don't know. This card is like, okay, so I'm sure this card is at least okay.
yeah, it's
Right.
passable.
It's the kind of card you can like absolutely play. It's not the worst. It cantrips, but I think people are maybe a little bit high on this card, and I'm definitely not into using this card in like a proactive way. Like I'm not trying to play this with like bounce lands or
Oh,
like
sure,
I'm not trying to do like any of the nonsense like
cheap mana without the cost.
yeah. None of that kind of stuff. That stuff I can almost guarantee you is just bad.
Yeah, so you
But
don't like
I
it in
do think-
Tron, for example.
Well, I think it no in Tron you're like no, I'm talking about trying to use it to like fight downsides of bad lands.
Okay, yeah, sure. I'm sorry.
I'm not
yeah.
I'm not playing a game plan that like revolves around playing 4 main deck Blood Suns. That's not happening. We're not
Yeah.
doing.
I'm so tired that I said that same thing with the bounce lands and I forgot that and asked you that question. That's on me. Continue. It's been a
Like
long day.
I think it could work in Tron or like Grixis or like against Valakut to me. So I think this is like a fine sideboard card to maybe a pretty good one at times. And like the cantrip thing is sweet. It shuts off fetch lands too. So like
Yeah, that is real.
it's not nothing, but it's super hard for me to be like. I just don't think this is that exciting a card.
I
You know what I mean? Like it's like fine, but I'm not building Blood Sun decks.
Yeah, some people are though, which is like kind of exciting. Like the idea that people do want to play Green Red Tron and maybe play this is interesting to me.
So
I'm just curious,
like
if
in
there's
the
any
main
to it.
deck?
Yes, people want to play Green Red Tron and put this in the main deck. Lots of people are talking. That's like one of the first things that went up, and I've seen people like post deck lists of like Moto, and they just put Blood Moon instead of Blood Sun.
Like just against Ghost Quarter?
Yeah, so it stops Ghost Quarter Tech Edge, which is annoying. You like mess up Death Shadow's mana base is one of the arguments. Valakut no longer becomes a hard matchup. Like that's like the ideas behind it. And then it always cantrips, right? I'm not super
And then we're
sold-
not playing Oblivion Stone anymore?
right.
I don't know. It's just like that sounds like nonsense to me.
I
Like
yeah,
sideboard card, great. You want to be
Yes.
Valakut, great. You want to, not get wastelanded a bunch, or like so. Like the Grixis decks basically can't play Blood Moon. Like Grixis Delver doesn't have any basics, and
in
the
Legacy.
Leovold, like the Leovold decks typically have like 2, so you can't really actually play Blood Moons, but you could like maybe play Blood Sun to make your lands matchup not actually unwinnable, and that's kind of cool. Like I'm kind of into that, but like I think it's a real stretch to be main decking this card. Like people will be like, "Oh, but it cantrips," but it still costs 3 mana, and like a 3 mana cantrip is not
That's something I'm excited
close
about.
to free.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say about Tron. The thing I don't like about Tron, like with this in Green Red Tron, is that like your Tron deck, what's really good is that you do the same thing every time, right? Like you simple turn 3 Tron, and then you play some big thing. And instead, you're telling me you want to have this Blood Sun card, which is against some decks completely embarrassing and unplayable. Actually, against a lot of decks, is completely embarrassing and unplayable unless you snag fetch lands, right? And you're not playing your Tron cards, and it's harder to then cantrip into stuff. Or it's taking the place of, like you said, an Oblivion Stone, which is like a catch-up thing, where something you can actually want to do while you're still working towards Tron. Because Oblivion Stone's a card you can play and then pop a turn later to like actually buy some time, right? So, I don't know. I agree with you. I'm 100% sideboard card. Awesome. It's nice to have a safety valve in standard. That's awesome in case the flip cards get out of control, right? But main deck, it's just seems so hard for it to actually be good.
Yeah, I have a hard time believing that this is like a main deck card, but but maybe I'm wrong.
I don't
It
think you're wrong, buddy.
yeah, it just seems rough.
Yeah,
Like I don't know.
yeah. I think I think people can tell we're not super high on this card as a main deck card.
But
And yeah,
that doesn't have to do with it not being powerful. I just
right.
don't think it's a good proactive card. Like it's a card that I want in very specific situations.
Yes.
Really good in those situations.
Yeah, I agree. There are like I will definitely play red decks in modern and legacy. Well, at least consider in legacy, right? Where I will want this effect because I can't play Blood Moon, but I need to beat those Valakut type decks, right? Because they're what's popular. So having access to this card
Yep.
is helpful then. And I'm
Yep.
definitely you won't ever hear me say it's bad for that. But the main deck proactive strategy or the Gotham strategy, I am not as big a believer on. I was joking around day one I wanted to play 8 Blood or 8 Moon, right? Where you play all the Blood Moons
Play
and the Blood
12
Suns.
Moon.
Wait, there's another Moon? What's the other one?
Well, you could play 8 Blood, 8 Moon.
Yeah. Oh, you can play 4 Magus of the Moon too.
Yeah, 8 Blood,
Oh,
8 Moon.
oh man. What a powerful
Or Crazy Eights, as it were.
deck.
It sounds so bad. I don't know why we're doing this, but
Oh, yeah, whatever.
yeah, you can play. I mean, I think it's a good card. I'm only saying I think it's a lot better as a reactive card than a proactive card.
Yeah. Yeah, we are nitpicking kind of, if anything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's very good.
Well, as the Blood Moon sets, or the Blood Sun, I messed up the segue. Ah, God. The Blood Sun sets on the set review. We are done with talking about our top 20 cards. Michael, I'm more excited than I was going into it. How about you?
Yeah, there are some weird ones. So like my top
Yeah, what's your top two?
three. Okay, my top three that I'm
All right.
excited to actually play with now. Tetsamok Primal Death. I think that card's just like better than people think it is. Rekindling Phoenix. I kind of talked myself into.
Okay.
And my honorable mention to like card I just want to actually play some games with is Direfleet Daredevil.
Yeah, I'm on the blue green enchantment that puts counters, Direfleet Daredevil, and then probably Tetsukamot because actually I want to play on that Phoenix 'cause I'm still not super sold. It seems like you've gone even further than I am on it, but I'm excited to play with it to see get a feel for it. I don't know. This set's exciting. I mean, behind the curtain, we weren't super big on this going into it. So
No, I don't think this set is especially powerful, but they're like, honestly, it's generally a good sign if we're not looking at the set review and saying like, oh, this stuff all seems great. Because the last thing you want, like, I know it's frustrating dealing with Kaladesh cards that feel so much stronger relative to everything else, but the worst thing you can do is try to fix it immediately by trying to print cards that just overpower them.
yeah, and we're kind of setting up for like a lower power standard, which will be nice when rotation happens, right? Like if we
Yeah,
can trudge.
that's how you solve it. That's
Yeah.
how it gets solved.
Right. Well, that's everything for this week's episode in the training grounds. We hope all of you enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun talking to Michael. Spencer is unfortunately sick, and he's sorry he couldn't make the show. He really wanted to do it. There was a little bit where like he was talking about doing the show with. I'm sorry, yeah, doing the show with us, and him just muting his mic when he's coughing and stuff. But he just couldn't do it.
Yeah, he just said he was feeling really crummy, and like there's no sense in forcing yourself through this when you feel like garbage.
Yep. Well, Michael's no starring the hashtag would that be good because we are at 2 hours, which is a little long, a little beefy. It's a thick episode, Michael. That's what I would call it.
Yeah, would you call it a Galta-sized episode?
Yes, I would call it that. Michael, where can people find you if they want to hit you up about Rekindling Phoenix?
You can find me on Facebook. My name is Michael Hinderocker. You can also find me on Twitter at MagicMikeMTG.
Yep. You can find me if you want to tell me about how dumb I am for wanting to put the 2/3 on blocker on Morfolk on Twitter at Mason. Am I Mason Clark? Yeah, Mason E. Clark on Twitter. It's changed now. I need to update it for the screen. And you can find me on Facebook each day on the Constructed Critics and Constructed Criticism family. Always glad to talk to people. And you can also catch me on Limited Time Only and behind the scenes on Proven Combatants. So find me around town. Michael, what did you learn this week as we head out?
I learned that I actually like a lot of the cards in this set.
That's
Like,
good.
more than I thought. Like, there are some weird ones.
I I'm laughing just because of how different and crazy the night's gone than I thought. Yeah, it is exciting. It's an exciting set. I'm excited to get down to business.
Yeah,
I
there are some amusing ones, and like sometimes more than cards that you look at and you're like, oh man, this is so good. I can't like if you're looking at it before you've ever played with it and think it's insane, it's probably going to get really old after 2 years.
Yep. Gideon, ally of Zendikar.
Right? Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you all next week.
Thanks. See you guys.